Good evening. Welcome to the October 14th Village Board work session. I will call this meeting to order. Let's begin with the pledge. Bob, would you please lead us?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And we do have a very interesting agenda of some meaty information here to go over tonight, but let's begin with some comments and announcements. Trustee Lopez. We're not hearing you. Omar, we're not hearing you even though. All right. Anytime. Nope, not yet.
How about now?
Now we got you. There you are.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The biggest news that I have is with respect to the census. So I have been trying to get the word out there as much as possible in all of the time that the census has been going on. And the last time that I checked in on this, the latest was that we had till the end of the month, to the 31st. But the Supreme Court decided yesterday, Tuesday, to allow the current administration to stop the census count before it was scheduled to end, which cuts short this process. That is really upsetting for a community like ours, which we know is historically undercounted, and we know how much the census means in terms of getting the resources that we need. So unfortunately, we don't have a lot of rationale behind why the Supreme Court decided what they did and why they did. And that can happen with emergency situations like this, but nevertheless, it is what it is. As I previewed for you last time, the other big battle is with respect to when the count actually has to be not just the count and counting each individual person, but then now that they have the information, actually crunching the numbers. The census directors in years past have advocated for at least 4 months to do that work. And right now we're down to 2 months to the end of the calendar year. And so that battle will continue, I'm sure, in the courts as well. The main message that I have for the community is this: we have until tomorrow to complete the census. And so take out your phone, make a call or complete it online. At this point, if you don't have it printed out or are unable to mail it, then electronically may be your best option. And it's good to know that we're starting from a place now, at least we're ending in a place that we've gotten higher numbers than both 10 years ago and 20 years ago. So our census counts continue to increase. We're at 66.1. That's good, but we know that we can do much, much better. So let's continue to do that. The second update that I want to give is also with respect to something that I previewed last time, which was the signs at the DPW site. Those are now up and ready to go. So thank you for all of the folks involved with making that happen. Truly a team effort. And now anybody who walks or drives or bikes or roller skates or pogo sticks past the DPW site can see what is going on there. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you,
Alrighty. Any other trustees that have any comments or announcements today? I know that Deputy Mayor Levin does. So go ahead, Rika.
Well, I really, October 24, exclamation point. That's what I want to say. Please, I'm begging, go out and vote. Tell all your friends in Idaho and Ohio and Illinois and Pennsylvania and anybody you ever met to please go out and vote. Vote however you want, but just please be involved in the process. And our own community center is the focal point for and I'm sure the mayor will talk about this, early voting will occur there. Lots of websites, Vote 411, one of my favorites, makes it very easy to figure out how to get things done. And more to come as we get closer to the date. Also wanted to just remind everybody that I know it's getting cold out there, but throw on a couple of sweaters and some long johns, and please go and eat in the wonderful restaurants outdoors that we have, and shop and walk around and say hello to your neighbors throughout all of Ossining, downtown, waterfront, and everywhere else. It's really important for the small businesses to make it through this pandemic. They're doing the best they can. Order out, sit on your porch, sit on your stoop, whatever. So just really encouraging everybody to go out and help all of the small business owners. That's it for me for tonight. Thank you.
Manny or Bob, do you have any comments or announcements tonight?
I do something real quick. October 20th, please don't forget, we are having a Zoom meeting, and that is in regards to the comp plan. That is also important for us, for our community. In this, and on our website, there's actually all that information that you're going to be needing to get information in regards to what that meeting is going to be about. So please come, give us some feedback, give us some of the concerns that you may have. We're here to make this better and to put a plan together that actually works for our community. So please join us on October 20th, 7:30 is our meeting. And again, it's a Zoom meeting. So please come and join us for that. Thank you.
Annie, I was looking today. It seems that you have drafts that folks can look at for most chapters now, or all the chapters have drafts now that folks can look at that they can comment on next Tuesday. Is it 7 or 7:30? You must have said it.
7:30.
7:30. Okay, I just wasn't listening carefully. Okay,
yeah.
Okay, I'm looking forward to that. Thank you so much. Bob, did you have anything to add tonight? You might be muted on the headset. There's that little.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, I hit the wrong button. No, I don't have anything. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Then I will just chime in with a couple of things. Yes, the census, we have 24 hours left. So if you are a procrastinator, some of us really need a deadline. It's been tricky because the deadline has been moving around. It was October, it was September, now it's tomorrow. So if you or anyone you know has not yet responded to the census, you got 24 hours to make it happen and help out Ossining, because there's still a third of our community that hasn't been counted. It's great that we've surpassed the numbers from 10 years ago, but really everyone deserves to be counted. I did want to just say to folks, Rika's comment about early voting and how critically important that is. If you're paying attention to what's happening in the rest of the country, other states are already voting. A friend of mine who lives in Georgia waited in line for 8 hours to vote on Monday. I promise, if you go to vote at the community center in Ossining during any of the 9 days that you can during early voting, you will not wait. I'd be surprised if you waited 8 minutes. Like, really, it's so incredibly convenient. On the village website, you can look at the Westchester Board of Elections to get the exact hours. Some days are a little earlier, some days are a little later, but we do have the voting information that's linked on our website as well, if that's an easier place for you to find it. So please, everybody, exercise your right to vote. And I just wanted to update folks. We have done a lot of we've had a lot of meetings related to the Police Reform and Reinvention Working Committee. Last week, you saw that we voted to move forward with the contract for Matrix. So that's where we are right now. And we'll be putting out a statement in a couple of days. We've added a few members to our working committee we're really pleased about. And so we'll get all that information out to folks, but it's something that people are really paying attention to and asking questions about. And we just want you to know we're hearing your questions. Omar's been really good about emailing people back when they email us individually. And we look forward to getting more information to you out about what is happening with the working committee. And then as soon as possible, we'll be having some dates for some public engagement. And that's really one of the most critical elements of this process, is to have the public engage with the village to talk about what we might have in our plan for the Police Reform and Reinvention Initiative. So I look forward to sharing more with you in a few days on that. Madam Manager.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. So,
okay, guys, you got to quiet down because I can't. I'm trying to.
Tonight we have very interesting agenda with a lot of good updates. So first off, Bill Garrison, our Recreation Superintendent, and Corporation Counsel Stuart Kahan, and Jamie Hoffman will bring us up to speed on our event policy that we have been working very hard on. Jamie, Bill, and Stuart have really taken this a long way. We've presented it in the past. We have gotten through stakeholder meetings and sending out drafts. We've gotten input from community members and key stakeholders, and we're really ready to bring it to a public hearing at some point and in the near future, and codify these recommendations. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleagues, Bill, Stuart, and Jamie. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start. Good evening, everyone, and thank you. Earlier, I sent you folks the most recent version of Local Law 8 of 2020, which is for want of a better term, the special events new local law. I want to thank particularly Bill and Jamie, who have been very, very helpful in helping me go through the local law. We did get some very, very good comments from particularly Pat Yost and some other stakeholders who were able to provide us with various comments. Those comments have in large part been incorporated into the proposed local law. Jamie, Bill, and I are of the belief that the local law is at a point now where the board could call for a public hearing by resolution at next week's meeting to have a public hearing on the 4th of November for Local Law 8 of 2020. It does provide, information in the local law with regard to the special events policy and how the special events are to be operated. It does create, as something we discussed before, a special events activities committee, which basically, an advisory committee rather, known as SEAC or SEAC, which would basically handle the larger special events or events where the rec superintendent thinks it's appropriate to get the SEAC input. The SEAC will be composed of basically department staff heads or their designees. We do indicate in the local law which kinds of events for which permits are not required. There are specific provisions relating to block parties. And we've also tweaked some of the time requirements here, again, at the suggestion of the stakeholders. One stakeholder said, well, why do I have to wait until 75 days before the event to file the permit? Can't I do it like at any time? So we now have it that no later than 75 days. So if you've hold your event on January 1st and you want to come in here on January 2nd to file it for the next January 1st, you're welcome to do so. We're happy to do that. We've also worked it out that we understood that certain information may not be available to the sponsor until, frankly, days before the event. And rather than require everything up front, which simply would not be doable, we've sort of spread that out a bit to give the sponsor more of an ability to get information, particularly dealing with food vendors and licenses and things like that. But we do have the insurance provisions that we had before. There are additional insurance provisions that would relate in the event that there is alcohol being served. Much of this will be incorporated into the planning guide. And I know that Bill is going to be working on the actual application, which will be an online application. One of the suggestions that was made by Pat Yost, which was really very helpful, was to take out of the proposed local law all the different items that we had before, listing what needs to be in the application. Since, as Pat pointed out and Bill seconded, if we should ever change what's in the application, we would then have to change the local law. This way, it will simply provide that you have to comply with what is in the application that is online, or whatever additional information the recreation superintendent thinks is necessary and appropriate. So again, we think that the local law is at a point now where a public hearing could be called for. It is fairly tight and has the information that's in there. I'll defer now to Jamie and Bill if they have any comments as relate either to the local law or to the planning guide.
Bill, did you want to go?
There we go. I think when we're reviewing this document, we've really come a long way, and it really creates a process for people who are looking to do events in Awning, and it's very detailed, and I think it's going to make the user end easier for folks who want to come in. We're going to have all the information there, and we can direct them things that in the past were kind of up in the air and we didn't have answers to. So I think this is going to make our job in recreation much easier because we're going to have information that we can give to folks, and having it online and processing it and having a detailed process to go through is going to be very helpful. So I'm looking forward to this.
I would actually echo both Stuart and Bill's comments. It will make it very seamless for the community to plan events and plan them for the future. And it funnels through one direct source. So everything will come through the recreation department, and then we go from there. And having a one-point person, which is a big thing that the community wanted, I think would be exactly what they're looking for.
Great. I have a few questions, but I'll listen to my colleagues first, and maybe they'll ask them all.
I thought that part of the, and maybe I missed it, where in this process is the decision about who gets to have an event, the scheduling of events? If two groups want the same whatever, or if there are too many requests, is that the committee? Is that the group that decides? Is that what's happening?
Well, since there's an online permitting process, it's a first come, first serve. So if you're an event that is looking to happen on October 3rd and you have chosen that date, then and it's available and it's within the purview of what we have for events that the village can support, then we'll be able to accommodate them and it becomes their event.
So one of the things that came up in the meeting that was had is that there are certain events that have been going on here for years. How's everybody going to be? I'm trying to understand how people will be informed aside from this meeting and next week's meeting, because there are certain events that just have been going on for years, and those folks actually have it in their budgets and in their plan. The day that you open up the registration, I'm imagining those that knew about it and had more access to information will immediately go on, but there will be some that have it every year. So are they sort of not going to be able to have it if somebody else
No.
bounces in? I'm trying to just understand.
No, I understand what you're saying. So, we do know that there's a certain weekend in June that the Village Fair does theirs. There's the weekend before Father's Day, I believe it is. That's the Portuguese Fair. And then now we have the Big Us Barbecue. They also have a date sort of in October that they look at. The Hispanic Day, they did it 2 years. They had not approached us to do it this year, but we'll be able to add those dates into the calendar. And reach out to them because they've had an ongoing conversation with the recreation department. So we'll definitely be able to accommodate them. I don't think that any of those 3 large events are going to be sort of fighting with each other for that. We'll be able to, when it goes live, we'll be able to, on the back end, Bill is able to go in and hold those dates and we can let them know. So that it will definitely be done in a fair way.
So
Yeah,
just to
I'm
add to that,
I'm sure it is. I'm just trying to understand what that fair way is.
so
That's-
just to add to that, we have pre-existing events. So the policy doesn't change the fact that we have pre-existing events, that we've been dealing with this issue for quite some time. So we are going to honor the major events that have identified and that we know they're running annually, whether it's the Village Fair or other events. Earth Day comes to mind as well. What we will be able to do is, once this is done, we had engaged a wide range of stakeholders. We have all their contact information, so we'll be able to push this out. I don't think it's been where we have had multiple events going on the same date. It's typically in very different parts of the community, town and village. So, for example, I believe the first big Os Barbecue ran, there was also Forest of Fears was running that weekend as well. So again, I don't think that too much of this changes in terms of how we've done it in the past. But we will be honoring those events that are established Awning events that have been run, and we basically know there's 3 or 4 of them that we know every year they run about the same time.
Great. And were you guys able to figure out how to spread events beyond to alleviate some of the congestion in the middle of the village and to spread things out to other possible locations so it's not always happening in the village? Because some of the businesses, if I recall the conversations, really raised the issue that it hurts their business dramatically. It doesn't, we always talk about how these things are really good for the village, but some of the businesses had a different point of view.
Well, prior to, pre-COVID, we had been having some of those discussions already. So last year when we did Hispanic Heritage Day, we actually did orient the street so that Spring Street was closed instead of Main Street.
Right.
So we've been starting to do that. We talked to prior, again, when we were planning and we thought we were going to have events, we had talked to certain groups about doing events down at the waterfront and other options, and we were making progress there. So I think that we will continue to do that. Change is hard for people, and some events lend themselves to street events more than others. But we also have been, we've also been talking to the chamber about when we do the village fair, how we make sure that we work even harder to engage local businesses to participate that day as opposed to shut down. And the ones that maybe are more challenged that day work out other, some businesses lend themselves better to things like that than others.
Right.
But we're really trying to work that out and look at other options. So also, because now we have fee schedules where we didn't have fee schedules before, it creates a different environment. Not that necessarily like we're trying to bargain, but there will be, you are going to have to, there is a premium to do things where you're closing a street versus events where you're not.
Great. Okay. I have some more, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation, so I'll wait. Thanks.
I'm sure others have questions. Who wants to go next?
Seems that no, the fellow trustees are not raising their hands. I'll go next. Thank you. This we've been talking about this for several years, I guess, and how do we manage events on different ways and make it more seamless in the process. That being said, just browsing through and just going through my notes in here, I have a couple questions, actually several questions, but I'm gonna ask for a few highlighted in my part. So there's so Karen, you made reference to an event that has actually happened in the town and an event that happens in a village. Is the same policy being implemented in the town of Awning?
No, they are aware, and we're sharing this information, and they do have the opportunity to incorporate it into their own policies. So we have been sharing this information, and they are a stakeholder. I mentioned it because the Earth Day is a village town event, even though it's held in the town. So again, if we were planning other events, you know, we may, depending on the nature of the event, if somebody wanted to do something on Main Street that day, it may or may not be the best option. So that's, and we will try to coordinate with the town more effectively too, so that as we do events that are Awning-wide, town and village, that we're really maximizing them as ways to drive people, you know, to Awning, to make it more of a destination, and to make sure that we're not cannibalizing each other's efforts.
Sure, no, I totally understand that. But let's say the town does not implement the same process of events that we are doing, sure. So let's say the town is going to be holding up an event the same day that the village is doing something. Since that they don't have a process and they may not be part of the calendar, what does that look like?
Well, the calendar still goes through recreation and parks, so they still are, there's still a calendar where we know what's going on. So it's just a matter of informing people. We really couldn't necessarily stop an event that was going on in the town the same day as a village event, but we would certainly work to coordinate that the same, you know, as we have done in the past. We've run into that same issue in the past, but typically because the parks are all, you know, falling under recreation, we're aware of what's going on any particular event day.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'll look forward to that shared calendar that we'll be having in our, I'm assuming, the recreation's website page. It will be a clear shared calendar of events that happen in the future through the years, through the year. Other questions that come to mind in regards to you know, process. In one of the sections in here, and just let me go back and find this section, talks about the different special events, correct? And talks about parades, different types of events, religions, portions. So we tend to have asked any processions or any parades that happen through our village to give us, you know, we sort of know the dates of the major events, but usually they come at the beginning of the year, most at the end of the year. All the stakeholders or the meetings that you had with the stakeholders, are they aware that, you know, we have a process, that this is happening, and how do we are coordinating with this, with the different entities, I guess?
So if you remember, we had like a fairly well-attended stakeholder meeting. I want to say there were at least 30 to 50 people there representing all the major event entities and organizations. So again, as soon as we have an adopted policy, or as soon as really we go to, you know, once we have the public hearing, we'll again re-engage those stakeholders, make sure that they have final opportunity to comment, and then we'll be able to adopt a policy, and we will push that out yet again to them as well. But we've been pretty clear to everybody that we've spoken to, everybody at that meeting, that, you know, we are going to be doing things different. There may be fees where there were no fees before. We're trying to do this fair and equitably, and that, you know, this will be, people will be treated consistently throughout the process, because those were some of the major issues that were raised before we had the process.
Okay, thank you. So I have two general questions, and probably Stuart can help me with this one. And this is just by recollection. I know there was that an alcohol fee for the parks, but for one of the parks, for one of the events that were happening last year. Was that addressed on this draft? Is that part of any of that?
There's no more fee.
Thank you. That's my clarification. Appreciate that. So that goes back to the technical part, sure. Technical part to me is the implementation. And Stuart mentioned something about the applications and what does the application look like. And because we do this part, you know, the village board is in charge of crafting the laws or implementing or passing the laws for this. We are not in charge of the implementation and what the process looks like. One thing that Stuart did mention is depending on the recreation person who's in charge, they may feel that they may want to add or delete or omit information on the application. So that's my concern. My concern is what happens to the application. So let's say 1 year, the application is X. The following year, the application becomes something along the way of a Y version of what X used to be. Then really the board doesn't have any control of that. So my recommendation will be, how do we, since that we are passing a law and we want to make sure the application reflects what the feelings of the board are, how do we, I don't want to say control that, but how do we approve those applications? In the past, we usually don't. You know, we don't look at the application. That's not part of this conversation. But how do we ensure that that is being addressed going forward? The other one is these applications that are going to be online, are they going to be able to be translated into different languages? Obviously, Spanish being one of the primary ones in here. So is that possible? How does that work? If you can fill those blanks online, you know, will be I know that there's an option, I think, in the recreation part with a previous program that Bill brought up to us, that you'll be able to translate. Does that work for the applications?
Yes.
Is that being working for the applications the way it should be working? So if you could kind of detail those blanks for me, and it will help me understand this better.
So my understanding is that the applications can be translated. And Jamie, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Sure. So it's similar to the way that our website works. Community Pass works the exact same way, that anything typed in there, I think that there's over 100 languages that it can translate into. The only issue is when someone fills it out in that language and it comes back to us, we may not, that's one thing that we'll have to answer if when it's filled out and submitted, if we're able to translate it, the whole thing back into English. But as far as the policy guide goes, we need to get it set up in English first so that we have it all set up, but we can absolutely have it translated over to Spanish as well.
Yes.
Thank
And
you.
then,
But I think just those two languages, but I think that Bill will have to answer the part about once the information submitted through the website, through the application, if it can be translated back into English so that when he's reviewing it, that he's able to comprehend it.
Yeah, so it'll get translated back into whatever language we need it into. So for me, it would be English.
so,
Great.
And then Trustee Casada, your first question, I'm not sure if I just, the application will follow the, will follow the law, the local law. So I don't think that there should be an issue, because if the event's in compliance with the law, it will be in compliance, we shouldn't really have an issue with that, but I'm not sure if I completely understood the question.
So let's say, thank you, Karen. Let's say the first year says we require, in some sort of insurance, regardless
Right.
of what that looks like, sure. Or it said we require a deposit, whatever that is. So the next year, that part is being omitted from the application. Parts of the applications are being, sectioned out, that they're not required anymore, or they are required. Different requirements may be added or going forward from that. So my concern is, I don't want to deviate from that first application. So who's going to review on the application that is going to be going online?
So we're gonna the applications, we can review certainly the board could weigh in on that too. The applications will fall out of the codes and the policies that we've put together. If we decide that there's a policy change that would change, I think it's a good idea that that we have, we can incorporate a process of approving. So whether it's the committee that approves that policy change or whatever, as long as it's not a local law change, that we can have a process to that, so it's not an arbitrary one-person decision. And then the board can be informed so that there's not a loss of control. I don't think that I think in the past, a lot of what happened was, things were done with really good intentions to accommodate different types of events, but they weren't done consistently. So I think the best way to make sure that if we may decide, things work, things don't work, things, we may need to decide we need to add some things. I don't think this is set in stone, but I think that there should be, I think where things get difficult is when you have one person or, I don't want to say arbitrarily, but one person making that decision and using discretion, and then that person is not there anymore, and then somebody else comes in that has a different interpretation. If we do it by some sort of standardized committee decision-making way when we need to have discretion or coming to the board for special considerations, I think those are ways we can address some of those issues. I don't know if Stuart wants to, Bill or Jamie want to add anything. There's always needs to be some measure of discretion, but I think in the past there was maybe a little bit too much discretion.
The early versions of the local law did list, I think, I'm guessing about 12 different things that had to be in the application. The thought was, and I think that most of those will in fact be in the application, we just did not want to really burden the local law with listing what those different elements are. And basically just when the person applies, it will indicate what that information is. The recreation superintendent will certainly have some discretion, but generally it's going to be more that they may want additional information. There may certainly be an event that's planned that won't require every box to be checked off because that's just the nature of the event. But there may be a circumstance where additional information is required. Depending upon the level of the event, the Special Events Advisory Committee may also request additional information if they think it is necessary.
Thank you, Stuart. So so I have one more comment on that one and then one more question and I'll be done. So pretty much to me, it would be helpful if they put some information as a requirement, very similar to what the building department does, correct? So if you go to the website, you see the list of requirements that you need to get a building permit. So if there's a list of requirements that has to be done attached to the application or part of the application process, I think it would be helpful for an applicant to go in there and kind of have all the documents ready by just looking at the document. So that's one. The other one is, I guess this is a general question and probably goes to Bill. And I know Jamie's been working very hard for this and helping Bill, but who's going to be managing this whole thing? Who's the person in charge who's going to manage the calendar? Who's going to be inputting all that information in this?
So ultimately, that'll be my responsibility, but utilizing the staff at the front desk at the recreation, at the community center. So right now, we have a similar process when people are renting fields or the town pavilions. We have a reservation system, and that reservation request comes in through our system. The staff will look at that. They will follow up if it's and look for that approval, and they can go ahead and approve those field or pavilion rentals. When the special event comes in, that'll get bumped to me to look at. So they'll look at it. I'll be able to look at it. If it's meets the criteria for something that I can decide on, then I will go ahead and do that. If it's anything else, then I bounce it up to the committee for further consideration.
So, thank you, Bill. So with that in mind, so to me will be more, how the process look like, correct? So I would like to learn a little bit more of what that means in regards to, I come in, so can I do everything online? Can I submit all this stuff online? I don't have to go to the community center. Can I do everything that I need to do by scanning documents, by sending that information, by making payments, can I do that? And how long would it take for me to get an answer that I'm able to? I know that day is available. You don't have to answer all these questions, by the way, but I would like to hear that at some point. I know that day is available, but I don't get an answer back for another 2-3 days. And maybe somebody else may have been waiting in the queue 2-3 days before, looking for the same date. So how does that correlate to my message? When do I know that I was out of luck? I knew it was available, the day was there, but somebody else took it because it was before me. But I didn't know that.
So I think that could be answered. I think again, people are in the queue, first come, first serve. There is a little bit of a challenge because if you don't get all your paperwork in, we can't secure the date. What we can do is we can do tentative polls. So right now, say you make an application and you want to do XYZ event on October 12th. So you make you put that in, we can do a tentative hold, but if within X amount of days you haven't provided whatever insurance documents or fees that you've needed, then we can remove the hold and pass it on to the next person in the queue.
Right, but again, so some of those applications, again, I don't want to, we can have this as an internal conversation, but I still have a lot of concerns in how is this going to be managed. But we can, we can have this.
But I want to really caveat the policy doesn't really. The process has been, we've been doing that for a long time. So once we know that date, you can submit online, so it's easier to hold the date. But that isn't really the challenge that we have, where this is actually better because, if somebody commits, asks for a date, we know they have it, it's going through one process, so it's not like somebody talked to, we have had issues before where people have talked to different people or town and village and there wasn't the coordination. So here you're going to have one point of entry, so you'll have that coordination. But the policy is really focusing on the bigger issues that we've had with events, which was
Karen, I don't disagree with you. The policy, I'm not talking about the policy. I'm talking about the process. And how does that get implemented? So that's not my concern. Is we are addressing the policy. We know what the path is. The path to that is there. My concern again is the implementation of this.
Yeah.
How are we going to get to that to apply the compliances of our policy? That's my concern. But again, we can talk about this offline because I'm sure other trustees have more questions.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. My first question is to you, Karen. If you could please tell me what the biggest changes are in response to that feedback session that you had earlier that you talked about.
So the biggest changes, we did document the feedback session too, but just the biggest issues that we had were coordinating events, and also a big issue was street events and businesses. So we have some year, almost every year we have the village fair followed by the Portuguese fair, followed by, a couple of events in a row that block the same street on a Saturday, Main Street typically. So that was, business owners had issues about that. There were issues about somewhat onerous policies that we've had in the past in terms of how vendors were licensed and insurance requirements, and there were some inconsistencies in how we had fees for some things but not for other things, and the fees did not really, from the village's side, one of the big issues, the fees didn't really relate to the event and the expenses associated with the events. So I think that and I asked Jamie and Bill to share too, but to me the biggest things were the coordination of events and balancing events that people want to go to that were great, and also making sure that they didn't conflict with businesses that were trying to operate on those days. consistency, and then ease of process, to not make it so onerous that it became just unwieldy and difficult for people to have events. So some of the way we did vendor permitting and things like that. I don't know, Bill and Jamie, if you remember things that I am not remembering, but those were the key things that I remember.
So some of the things that they had brought up were also communications, as far as knowing when
Yes.
things were going to take place, and that you would have, say a newer business that didn't know that there were these two big back-to-back events that would take place, or that there was a procession that was going to be blocking off the highway and people were going to get stuck for longer periods of time than expected. And then also, one of the really big things outside of that was one point of entry and consistent information, and that everyone be treated the same and fairly. And one of the things that this policy will cover is everyone will be treated fairly. While you may not be able to see someone has put a hold in the queue, that actually might be something that Bill could do, is if an event comes in, that automatically the front desk just puts a hold on the date. As soon as somebody does receive, as soon as the application comes in, it's on hold, so that somebody else maybe won't go and choose that date because they'll see it's on hold, and then say 2 weeks later it can go, it will become open again, let's say, if they decide not to do it. But on our end, things that have come up in the past are that the recreation department was receiving a tremendous amount of event applications that would take a lot of time, that would say, we don't know if we're going to have an event. Let's talk to you about it. Let's see. And it would be a tremendous amount of time on the part of the recreation department to talk about it. And then, they would decide to not do it. So before we can really have a conversation going on in the future, when you submit the application, I think that it's a nominal fee, probably $25, but that may deter someone who just wants to have a conversation to discuss if they want to have an event, to be more buttoned up when they speak to the recreation department, because when they apply for it, they're going to have all the information that they need to have, and then they'll know what they need to do, and it saves a lot of time as well. I hope that helps.
That helps a lot. Thank you very much. So this next little series is called Loopholes. So loophole number one, potentially, is that an event doesn't need a permit if it's sponsored in whole or in part by the village. Can you just clarify for me what particularly sponsored in part by the village, and if somebody approaches us like, well, the village endorsed this, so, like, what does that mean?
Some of the events that we do as a village would not necessarily fall under this, and that would be the lighting of the holiday tree, things of that nature. I'm trying to think of other examples.
The Green Ossining, the Earth Day, we co-sponsor that with the town of Ossining as well.
That's somewhere though that I think that we should, that occurs in the town, so it does have different rules than if we did it in the village. And I think Green Ossining, Earth Day is something, Green Ossining is a village town organization. But the nature of that event is such that it would be, I think it's something that we should consider were it to move to somewhere in the village. We'd have to really be clear on the nature of that, and I think you make a good point, Trustee Lopez. What exactly does it mean to be a village or town, a village sponsored event, and what is in part? Because that is potentially a place where we have different things that are perceived. What you will hear is everybody will say, but we're a good event, we're doing the good things for the village, and we're bringing people to the village, and we're great, and the village should sponsor it. And I do think that we should make sure that we clarify that to the degree possible, so that because there are a lot of things that fall into that, and some events require a tremendous, a tremendous amount of resources. And if they do, we need to be conscious of that. But the fireworks is also something that requires a tremendous amount of resources, and I think we would continue to do that with the town. So that also would be an example. But we'd want to make sure there was a really clear line of relationship to the village in that regard.
That's helpful. Next, the section around expressive activity has as examples press conferences, speeches, protests, demonstrations, and I recognize it says without limitation, so that it could include other things. Expressively, it does not name music of any kind. To what extent do you think about music with respect to expressive activity?
I did not, actually, because that's when in all other ordinances that have used similar things, they do not refer specifically to music. It is essentially more by the way of illustration. Again, it's without limitation, so there could be some basis where if someone comes in and uses music as an adjunct to what they are otherwise presenting, it may well fall within the expressive activity category. They would, however, depending upon what kind of music they're doing and if they need to, any sound system, they would still be subject, obviously, to any noise ordinance that the village has.
Helpful. Any others? No. Okay. I would not even have come up for me were it not for 2020 and that having been a particular note. And I realize it's not a very easy answer to that, but I just want to name that somebody could potentially start to use that as a loophole. The final, I have two little baby questions. One is, I doubt anybody would actually ever do this, but if someone were to want to request a record of the events that were requested and then either approved or denied, the digital nature of it, I'm sure, makes it relatively easy to have a record of it. But is that something that, as you're thinking about the process, you will be able to readily produce that kind of record?
It would be subject to FOIL. Simple as that. They ask for it. If we have it, we don't have to create something that does not otherwise exist. But if we have it, they'd be entitled to it.
So I suppose that's my question. Will we have it?
Well, presumably, if folks are going to be applying, there'll be some record of an application. So, we would have that.
We will, any application that is not done online, and we'll have a paper applications available as well. Once we get those paper applications, we will then put them in the system. So they'll go in online. So we will have a record of the application and the approval or denial.
Super helpful. Thank you. My last little baby question is whether when particularly for those level 1 kind of events under 300 people, if the superintendent declines it, I know for the higher levels, they do get a written reply with why it was denied. Does the same apply for those level 1 events?
Well, if it's denied, it goes to the Special Events Advisory Committee.
Okay. So that, just so I'm clear, so that if someone says, hey, I want in Market Square have like a 50-person event, and it turns out that they don't have the appropriate paperwork for whatever it is that they want to do, and that's the reason the superintendent denies it, that goes to the SEAC?
No. It only goes if the application's complete. If the application is not complete, then it's denied because they never completed the application. So that would not go to the SEAC. It goes to the SEAC. If the application comes in, it's complete, the superintendent looks at it and has questions about it, then he can kick it up. But if it's merely that they did not provide documentation that they are otherwise required to provide, it's simply denied.
Right. I suppose that is the crux of my question, because my sense is that if you're doing a level 2 or 3 event, generally you have your stuff together, and there's going to be some number, I suppose, of people that have incomplete applications, but for the most part, if you're planning on having 800 person event, you've thought through some of the details. But if you want to have a 75, you would think, if you want to have a 75 person event, my sense is that there are going to be more of those, and more of them that will be denied just because they don't have full applications and those kinds of things. And I would like to have some sort of record of that, like, as those are denied, like denied for lack of full application or something like that. And nothing extensive, but just so that we have a sense of what patterns may emerge, because it may be that it's helpful for us to make it more explicit that what the application process needs to be, about whether it's a language access thing, whether it, I don't know, whatever it may be, but that kind of record keeping for those like level 1 denials, I think would be super helpful.
Just keep in mind one thing, Trustee Lopez. I do think what you say makes sense. Every record you create then becomes a foilable record. So the more you create, the more you have to retain. The more you retain, the more you may ultimately have to turn over. I just want you to just be aware that there's a flip side to everything that we create.
Yeah, that is a fair point. My feeling comes from if we have essentially half a record, because we'll have the record of them applying, but we won't necessarily know what ultimately happened to it. And I'm thinking about it kind of preemptively, trying to preempt, looking at it, assuming the best of like people saying, hey, I noticed that like a lot of people are being denied for these kinds of events. Why is that? For us to be able to answer that question using data. But I take your point that we want to be thoughtful about record keeping.
It may be a very simple thing that on the application, if it's denied, it could simply say application denied, documentation insufficient. That's all.
Yeah,
and that simply settles the whole thing right there.
Thank you. All right, I'm all set.
Mr. Fritchie, you have anything for us? No, you're good. Okay, then I'll go through my my final questions. You guys took care of some of them. Thank you very much.
If I may ask just one question, sorry.
Sure. No, go right ahead.
I appreciate that. Thank you. So Stuart, thank you. And Omar kind of made me think about something else as well. So penalties and people that do not follow the process, what does that look like and who's enforcing this? Bill, would you be enforcing this? And what does that look like? Are we creating some sort of, we have sanitation tickets, sure. If someone puts the trash in the wrong day, we have the yellow stickers and, different offenses in the wrong department, things of that nature. What does the look like for people that do not follow this process? Bill, if you can enlighten me in this, please. And how does again, who's enforcing this?
Are you talking about after the permit is been issued in the event and people aren't following it?
Well, both. Let's say the event is happening and actually is more than what they pictured it was going to be. One, sure. And maybe someone didn't go to it, didn't file an application, and is having an event in a park. It's having all this gathering. What happens then? Who's enforcing? Who's watching over pretty much this?
Right. So, I mean, this came up at one of the Recreation Advisory Board's meetings regarding enforcement of park rules in general. And a lot of that came out of this past year with COVID. And we do have some rules that are in our parks, but they're not enforced. And the whole idea of enforcement needs to be recognized. We do have some stipulations in this process, which if people can be, organizers can be billed later. So if they did end up having more people at the event than they had said, we can then bump up their fee after the fact, and that they would be required to do that. The other thing is if we find out that there is, that the policies were not followed, we can use that as a reason for denial if they come to do an event again in the future.
Who's checking?
Manny, are you done or?
I just want to know who's checking this.
Oh, okay.
So the way, again, this is similar to the way it works now. So it sort of depends on what the offense is. If there is an issue where there's an event in a park, it's on a weekend, and it was a non-permanent event, then, police are the ones who usually check for the permit. I'm not, the degree of enforcement has to do with the degree of seriousness of the violation. So if something's getting sort of, out of hand, or there's health and safety, wellness violations, or any breaking of rules, drinking in the park with alcoholic beverages, things like that, that can be shut down. That would require police to shut that down.
Yeah, no, I understand that. Thank you. But but let me ask you a quick question. And after that, I think Bob wants to ask something else. And I apologize to the mayor for asking this question. I know it became more than what it was, I believe. So if the police is supposed to be enforcing this, how will the police department know that those events are happening?
They're part of that committee.
I get it, but so they will have a list. They'll have the same access schedule for the events are happening through the village.
Yes.
The town at the same time. Okay.
So and that's a process we have in place now. So that really won't change. We'll be using the same process to enforce events and make sure people are compliant going forward.
Bob and then Rika.
So my question is, I guess to Bill or Karen, right now you've got a fee. If they're going to want to use the park, you got a fee, and that's it. They paid a fee. And Bill, you made a statement of, well, if they aren't compliant, then we'll just put that on record. I have a hard time swallowing that. I think there should be a deposit on top of the fee. I mean, this is my opinion. And if they're compliant, everything goes well, you rip the check up and everything's good. If not, and there's a problem, you hold a deposit, because you're chasing a rabbit at that point. That's my opinion. My other question is, these fees, these events that we're talking about that the recreation department is going to control, is this is just in the parks, or any of these large events, the village fair, Portuguese Day, Happy Clown Day, whatever, that's going to be closing the street. Do they have any part in that granting these permits, but which they don't get permits anyways? But you know what I'm saying? Is this just directed at parks and that kind of thing, or is it broader than that? Because I'm not getting the whole sense of what the recreation department's controlling.
So what we're doing is it's for all areas. Any event that meets the special event criteria that is happening on any village-owned property. So we are going to be the gatekeeper of all those applications. When it meets the criteria that an application meets is only level 1, that can be handled within the recreation department. The larger events that you speak of would automatically get bumped up to the committee for approval of the permit. So what we're doing is we're going to get that application. We're going to work with the organizers to make sure that they get in all the stuff that they need to on their application, their insurance requirements, their site plan, all the things that we are asking for to get that application complete, and then it would go to the committee for review.
Okay, so I don't know, the comment about possibly a deposit for your park areas. I know I've been to plenty of events at parks, and usually when time is up, your ranger or whatever you want to classify him as shows up, and everybody complies, or at least the events that I've been to. I'm presuming that at that point, if something's not going the way it should be, that is a couple ways they handle it. Does he handle it, or does he call the police? you know, if it gets out of control, I'm presuming that that would take place, that to make sense. But I didn't know if my thought of, you know, putting a deposit on events, just things happen, you know, instead of chasing that rabbit, let's be in a better position of saying, hey, we had this, the ranger documented it. We're not going to give you a deposit back because of this. And then that'll deter them from either coming back, or next time they do the right thing. You know, I just would like to get your feelings on that.
Trustee Fritchie, the local law has a provision that a bond can be requested. And
Okay.
it can then be applied.
Okay.
And I do
Thank you.
just want to point one thing out. While most of these special events obviously deal with what occurs on village property, if there is an event on private property that would involve village services or a closing of a road or something like that, that is a special event that would warrant the need for a permit. So it is not, I don't want it to, while most of ours are clearly held on village-owned property, it's not exclusively that.
All right. Thank you, Stuart. So I can presume that this bond is discretionary then, the way it sounds.
It is at this point. I would say, though, that certainly for the larger events, I would certainly think that the Special Events Advisory Committee would want to impose something like that. And it could also be something that the superintendent could put in as well. So we didn't put it in as mandatory, but it is certainly something that can be done, particularly if you know that you're going to be needing if you're going to be having, let's say, a lot of potential trash and things like that, you may want to get the bond so that basically you can use it to pay for the cleanup. And then if there's anything left at the end, they get it back. If not, you've at least got the bond to pull. So, but we haven't made it mandatory, but it is clearly discretionary to request that bond.
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Rika, I see you have a virtual blue hand up.
I didn't want to interrupt. So 2 of my questions are already addressed. I don't think we have received an answer, but I think we're going around the circle. It has to do with the fines, whether Bob refers to take the money up front and then give it back. It's all around. There are some very large fines, but it's not really clear how one is going to collect, and going to court for it, to me, is not the way to go with these kind of things. It's just going to cost us even more money and more aggravation. And so I think that was where Bob was heading, and I was going to address that. So I do want to point that out. The enforcement was also raised, also an issue. So I'm glad that was done. I just want to get some clarification. All of these fairs, it could be nonprofit, for-profit, whatever, whoever is doing it, all on the benefit, of the village and to bring people together and all these wonderful things, all good stuff, entertainment, etc. Are people allowed to charge for any of these events? It doesn't actually address whether an organization can charge for attending an event. At least I didn't see it. And by the way, kudos to the team that worked on this. That was like a lot of heavy lifting. So I should have started my comment even earlier with that. That's like a heck of a job, and we've been talking about it for years. So really big kudos to all of you for thinking through all these details. It's pretty fabulous, actually, and long overdue. So it's all about being consistent from one group to the other was, I think, the number one issue for people, that tell us what we have to do, how we have to do, but then be equitable across all of us without one group getting more than the other or having more in or whatever. So congratulations on that. But I do want to ask, so do we have a policy that people can or can't, or do we simply not have a policy whether people can charge, not for items sold at a parade or at an event, I'm not talking about that, but to charge for an event in the first hand?
Do you mean like an entry fee, like a ticket
Yeah, any
price?
of those kind of things.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I'm going to let Stuart answer that, because I think that there is something maybe in the code or not.
I don't believe there's anything in the code specifically. There are municipalities, particularly out on the end of Long Island, that have specific, that differentiate between essentially for-profit or not-for-profit events in terms of both fees paid and what they can do and what they can't do. We have not put anything in there that says what they can or cannot charge. I mean, you know, if it's, there might be a question as to whether or not what they can do on a particular public street, you know, can they, but we have not included anything like that in terms of saying they can and cannot charge for, let's say, an entry fee or something like that. We have not done that.
Well, also through social media, people can actually request and give codes, and also, like, it's for entertainment. It's really for concerts is really when it usually comes up. So absent that, does that mean that people can or can't, that it's up to the organization? In other words, absent that point of differentiation, it seems to me that if I were asking for a permit for something, I could charge or I could not charge. That's up to me. That's part of maybe some of the questions, etc., absent us addressing it. Is that correct?
It is one of the questions on the application.
Okay. All right, good. So you guys thought about it. You've got a committee. I'm assuming the committee is going to meet on a regular basis. When you open the doors to this, you're going to get a whole bunch of people, but then it'll become a pattern. You know, over time, the curve flattens out, I guess, over time. So that's great. Okay, well, thank you so much. Those were my questions. And I know it's taken a while to have this conversation, but there's just so much there to unpack. So thank you.
Okay, so a lot of questions have been asked, and remarkably, I still have more. So I think, you know, one of the benefits that we've had to COVID is we've had a lot more time to think about this, and we're obviously not going to have, we didn't have the same summer events or even fall events that we anticipated. I'm not sure what we'll see for next spring. But if we are able to go outside and have events, chances are people are going to want to go outside and do things when they can. So I do hope that we're able to have something really great in place by early next year. I do think, though, that it's worth going back to the stakeholders before we call for the public hearing. When we had that meeting with the stakeholders, we had really great attendance, and we got some feedback, and I know that that's been reflected in here, but people weren't reacting to anything. We didn't have a draft for them to respond to. So I would ask that we reach out to, and I'm sure we still have the list of people who came to that meeting at the community center oh so long ago when we used to meet in person for things, ask them to take a look at it. And I think it might be a good, you know, it's unusual when we have a law that we can use as we can actually do an exercise and find out, okay, let's do a mock application from some of these people who've held events before. They know what their event is going to be. They know what the demands are going to be. Let's do, and you've probably done this yourselves, but I think it would be beneficial if some of the stakeholders could go through that process and give us their feedback now that we have an actual draft. Because, I mean, this could be law very soon, and then we would be doing the experimenting. So I'd like us to just reach out to the stakeholders and see if there's any that would be interested in going through a mock experience with the application. With the
Mayor, can I just point out, it was sent to the stakeholders and we got 3 responses.
Oh, great. When was it sent?
In June.
In June. The iteration prior to this one was sent, and that's when I got Pat Yost comments. I got some, I think, from the folks for the
Portuguese Fair.
Portuguese Fair, and there may have been one other. That was it.
Great.
We maintain the momentum, so like we thought maybe we would be having events by now, so we were really trying to get that in. So yes, there was some of this feedback, so we did push that out. So
Great. So then I do want to clarify, I'm glad that Trustee Lopez phrased it the way he did, you know, to be mindful of potential loopholes. And, you know, I would like to specifically understand when we talk about special events that are village in part sponsored, like, I don't think that list is likely to grow very much, but I think we should be explicit, not necessarily in the law, but all of us, obviously the firefighters parade is our fire department. That's a village event. The Memorial Day Parade is organized by the veterans. That's an independent group, but I think we still really want to have our Memorial Day Parade if we ever get to have a Memorial Day Parade again. So I think there does need to be some clarification of a policy. It doesn't need to be in this law, but I think the board needs to identify what is the policy for how do we designate which of these are village events, and maybe even create a sort of a standing list of things that have historically been events that would qualify as village events or village events in part. Okay, and I don't know where Earth Day falls in that. I really don't. When you mentioned that there could be events that are on private property but do demand village resources, would that include the St. Anne's Fair?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe it's in here and I just didn't see it, but it used to be that anything that required a permit, and it was a much less comprehensive rules that we have in place right now, was if there was amplification involved. Is that a distinction here?
Yes.
Where, Jamie, was that you?
It was me. I don't have it open, but I believe it's at the beginning, and it says if it was above whatever amplification it's supposed to be, that it would require a permit. Okay. That was one of the special event requirements. I think it's on page 1 or 2.
Yes, the use of amplified sound exceeding the standards set forth in Chapter 178 of the Village Code.
Okay. So expressive activity, either protected by the First Amendment of the United States, so that means religious events as well?
But not processions.
Okay. But somebody could preach in Market Square?
Possibly.
Okay. As long as they didn't do too loudly, it could be, and it didn't attract more than 48 people. Wasn't anticipated to attract, right?
Also true.
Okay. The insurance rate of $3 million aggregate is still one of the highest of any of the communities that we did the research on.
Correct.
We're not usually the highest because we're not the wealthiest community.
I leave that up to the board. I've spoken with our insurance broker. 1 million, 3 million for an event is generally what I know other communities, if the board wants to lower it to 1 million, 2 million, it's the board's determination. As I said, I've spoken with our broker and another broker, and that was their recommendation.
Well, I mean, of course, the insurance company always wants to get the higher number, but if most communities are doing,
well, no, that's to protect the municipality. That's why the 3 million in the aggregate does that. But the board wants to have a lower aggregate, it can always be changed.
Okay. And then when it comes to the indemnification and hold harmless, I'm very pleased to see it seems like this is now we're only asking for a hold harmless to be signed by the event organizer, by the applicant. Is that correct?
That is
rather
correct.
Than every vendor or every performer. It's not specific, but in the past we've required notarization. Are we requiring notarization anymore for this?
We will, absolutely.
I mean, it's less of a big deal if it's just the applicant, but I think no, it doesn't specify this. What it says is in a form satisfactory to Village Corporation Counsel.
And that would and the form satisfactory to me will be notarized. Okay, I guess I'm a little bit uncomfortable with that in general. I'd like to have a broader conversation about notarization and requiring that. Mayor, the reason I apologize, the reason is simply this. I don't know who's signing it, but if someone comes up and basically goes before a notary and the notary says, this is the person who came before me, then that's fine. Or if they want to come to me when we get past COVID and show me proof of ID, that's fine. I don't just want a form that is not, that it simply comes back signed. I have no idea then who signed it.
People sign things all the time.
But not legal documents, which is an indemnification and hold harmless.
But you're saying an ID, if somebody shows you an ID, that's enough? So
That's
is that,
what that's what a notary requires.
okay, but even if it's not you, if it's some designated person where they look at ID when they accept a signature and sign their name, even if they're not a notary, if they don't have that stamp, would that be acceptable is my question.
No. I mean, it's a legal document. It needs to be notarized. That's all. If they want it, they can come here, and if I'm able to, I'll notarize. My paralegal is a notary. Nancy Conklin is a notary. Martha in the clerk's office is a notary. We got plenty of notaries. So if someone wants to come in, they can get it notarized. But it's important that it be notarized.
Speaking of the Special Events Advisory Committee, and by the way, for anybody who doesn't ever attend OEM meetings, this is pretty much everybody who attends an OEM meeting. So they meet regularly. So I imagine that when these applications come up, they'll be discussed during an OEM meeting, which is, the big things like fireworks and the village fair and big events that require street closings are always discussed in OEM. So this is actually a pretty easy assemblage of people to be able to regularly review applications as they come in. I would like to add, unless you guys thought of it and can convince me otherwise, I'd like to add the mayor or designee.
What?
To the list of the Special Events Advisory Committee.
Yeah, I think I forgot to ask that, why there isn't any people's representation on there. Who do you think it should be, mayor or designee? Is that what you just said?
Yeah, I mean, which is pretty much how it is, because that's what it says, or designee. These people or designee, so it could be the chief. Sometimes he sends his lieutenant, In our case, it could be any of us. Well, it wouldn't be me because I don't think there's anything going to happen before the end of the year, but it could be Rika or anybody else.
So did you want that added in now? Does anybody object to that?
If I may, the one reason that it was not done is that in the event that a permit is rescinded for any reason, the person can appeal that to the Board of Trustees.
Okay.
That's interesting.
So if you vote on it, it would be construed as what? Because you voted on it. Well, it's not, I don't even know, I guess they're voting on it.
You shouldn't be essentially appealing something that you were involved in at a lower stage. That's what it comes down to.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, okay. That's fine.
Yep, makes sense.
Just if the conversation happens in an OEM meeting, the mayor is likely to be there, but if they're not voting, I guess that's fine.
The reason it might not, Mayor, is because these are subject to open meetings law. The OEM is not.
Oh, okay.
So it's a good point because I don't know that everybody knows who goes to the OEM meeting. That's the Office of Emergency Management. And when we're not meeting to talk about an emergency, we largely talk about events, and that meeting's held monthly. Or in the event of an emergency more often, or coinciding with the emergency event.
Yeah. So what's the reason for having it be a public meeting? Subject to public meetings?
Because they're making a determination.
Okay. So then it would be publicly noticed. So if the people who are going to be impacted by it wanted to attend, they could attend.
That is correct.
Is there any stipulation that I'm not noticing that there's any public notification other than the bare minimum of our regular legally obligated public notification of public meetings?
It would follow what we're required to under the open meetings law.
Okay. Because one of the things we had discussed was, some of the business owners on Main Street said, it'd be really great if anybody came to us before you kept allowing all of these back-to-back weekend events, and said, and we've become much more aware of this as a part of this process. That's one of the things that they suggested was, gee, we would like to have been able to express our concern about losing 2 Saturdays of business in a row. So that people may want to be made aware of when these events are being considered. I don't know that it needs to be in the law. I'm saying it now though, so that we all keep that in mind.
So I think that's a good point. One of the things that that people also asked for, and this goes back to Omar's question and Jamie's point before on the communications, is sort of a calendar. So I think we can also keep the public calendar, but the other issue of closing the street, like that is a discussion we have been having. And again, in anticipation, when people thought their spring and summer events would be happening now, we had these conversations. And what we found is when we brought those conversations to different stakeholders, they were much more receptive to considering other ways of doing things. There wasn't necessarily turnkey, but again, it was discussions that sort of hadn't really been had before in that way. So hopefully through this process, like we do get to the point where we understand that if the events sort of cannibalize the businesses or really don't create an all boats rise scenario for, economic development is a reason to hold some of these events. So hopefully as we go through this process and there's more engagement around it, we get better and better of understanding not just the impact of one event, but the amplification of that if we're considering it more broadly, even if the event producers do that.
I recall that we discussed prospective fee schedule the last time we discussed this. If that was circulated this time, I did not take note of it. Do we have the fee schedule? Which wouldn't be part of the law, but it's helpful for us to understand what are we requiring for the different levels and any other of the.
Or is that being recommended at the budget meetings, which was what I assumed, but I'm not sure.
I don't have.
Jamie?
Recommended fee schedule.
My understanding was that there was
We
going to be a
didn't
fee. There was going to be a fee for the application, right, Jamie?
Yes, it was a $25 fee for the application, but there were other pieces that we were going to discuss, but I think it was going to be done during the budget because we need to do a little bit more discussion between internally to decide parking spot, if we're going to do that, and for different fees for the police department, if we use their stuff, all the different components, fire department, OVAC, and SOVAC, so on, they have to really contribute to the conversation.
Yeah. So I know that we have drafted this and we have a general idea what direction we're going. What I recommend internally is we get that on the table as soon as possible, because we're in the middle of doing the draft budget right now. So I'd like to have all of that. We should have that done sooner rather than later, because it would be good to have it reflected in the draft budget.
You mean the fee schedule associated with it?
Yes.
Right, it doesn't really make sense for us to put this into law. Nothing can happen until the fees are in place also. So,
right.
They should be figured out hand in glove. All right, I think that covers all of my questions. It's been a very in-depth discussion in item number 1 of the evening. Is there any last questions or comments before we move on to, I think Bill's sticking with us, and I think he's bringing on a special guest next, right?
So, Mayor, can I just be clear, based upon this, we're not going to put it on for a resolution for a public hearing just yet?
I don't think there's any hurry to, because,
Okay.
If we did, we certainly would be keeping it open, but why don't we just hold off and we have a couple more weeks to get the fee schedule reviewed.
Yeah, but Victoria, if you did put it on and had a public meeting, do we need a public meeting on this?
Well, you need a public hearing on the local.
Hearing. It actually gives all those folks and stakeholders more of an opportunity to look at this. I'm looking at my iPad as I do this. It's pretty detailed and long.
Yes.
So maybe it would be an advantage to all of the folks with small businesses and organizations to have that time. I don't know. So I mean,
that's fine. Yeah. So, but then let's just all of us have an expectation that we can put it on for a public hearing, call for the public hearing next week to then be on for 2 weeks from now, and then plan to keep it open until we have a fee schedule associated with it, so that the applicants can comment, having a real idea of what their what they'd be asking of them going forward, because some of these event organizers have been doing this for many years, and this is something new for them. And I would just feel better if when we pass this, they have an understanding, and we have an understanding of what we're doing going forward. And I really appreciate one of the comments that was made. I think it was Karen was saying that the fees should really reflect the demands that the event has on the village resources and on other community members and stakeholders in the area. And I do think that's really important. So that'll be another thoughtful conversation about the fee schedule. So thanks for that. Okay. Madam Manager.
So thank you all for that. And again, thank you, Board, for recognizing it was a lot of work that went into this. There's a lot of moving parts, but we've moved the needle ahead and we'll continue to do so. Next up, another initiative that we've been working very hard on, and this is part of a precursor to our Youth Bureau. We did, through a grant that was funded by Open Door, provide a youth leadership program this summer, and we also are in the process of doing another semester, I guess, of that. Mike Garcia is here with us tonight. He has run those programs, and he's going to give us an update. Bill and he are going to give us an update on what happened this summer and a little insight into what's going on right now. So thank you again, Bill and Mr. Garcia.
So as Karen said, we ran a summer youth leadership program through the Recreation Department because we did not have the Youth Bureau up and going. So this program was 6 weeks long, and we hired Mike Garcia to run the program, as well as some other staff members to help get this program off the ground. So Mike has a short PowerPoint presentation just to share with everyone so you can see what happened this summer. And it was a really good program because it really kicked off the Youth Bureau program, and we are continuing with a fall program right now. Mike is still working 2 days a week with a lot of the kids that he got to the program this summer. So I'll turn it over to Mike at this point.
Good evening.
Mike, are you ready for the presentation, Mike?
I'm ready if we want to go with the presentation first, and then people can ask questions.
Sure.
It's a quick presentation just to give you that information. It was because we weren't sure what the time was going to be like today, so we just wanted to make sure that we got this in. So my name is Michael Garcia, and I ran the Summer Youth Leadership Program for this summer. The kids came for 6 weeks, and we'll go through the slide. I just want to thank several of the people that helped make this happen this summer. You can see the thanks to those people there, including the recreation staff that were here in the building. It took a lot to get this going, and they were very helpful in it. It was co-facilitated by program assistants Calissa Sawyer, Catherine Buzang-Hill, and James Johnson. Are you able to move that?
I'm trying.
You want me to do it, or are you moving it up? Okay. So the Summer Youth Leadership was created from a statement that was requested from me. As if this was going to be a 6-week program, what would be the things that I would cover, and what would it look like? Who would we engage in the community? So I was asked to come up with this statement, and it basically is: a Summer Youth Leadership Program is run through the newly developing Awning Youth Bureau. Its goal is to provide an opportunity for middle and high school students of Awning to develop and utilize leadership skills. The approach shall be youth-driven, adult-guided, and include opportunities for racial equity to be explored and shared. Youth engaged with our Awning programs and youth looking for a way to engage in their communities are strongly encouraged to participate. Next slide. Okay, so the approach. Essentially, the leadership focus and work with the youth in a roundabout way was to reduce substance use, because Open Door was funding this, and that's sort of the focus that we needed to have. But it wasn't upfront. It was more the leadership skills and ways to increase the kids' pro-social activities and increase their leadership skills. And through the process, develop their confidence. So youth participated in workshops for 6 weeks, 2 days a week, 3-hour sessions. We used snacks and gift cards to engage the kids as incentives. We had raffles every day, 5 and 6 of them some days, and that really got the kids motivated and excited about being there. So youth ages were 10 to 18 in 2 cohorts, middle school and high school. We thought that the 10-year-olds were not going to get it. They actually did a fantastic job. They were very much engaged, and they got the material, even some of the stuff that we thought was going to be over their heads, they actually got the basic concept of it. Youth were engaged through a mixed approach. We did lectures, individual activities, PowerPoint. We engaged apps and technology. We used, you know, the whiteboard. We used the sticky pad. We used all of that stuff, and the kids were able to get different ways of learning through that process. Youth of different maturity levels, learning styles, and cultural backgrounds were engaged to participate. The program assistants were extremely important in this process, because as I'm up front, or as they were up front, because I gave them the opportunity as well to teach whatever they wanted to teach at a certain point, as long as it was in the structure of what we were trying to get done. The kids really needed the support just to keep it going, just to keep engaged, but also to feel as though that what they're saying was important and being encouraged to speak up and participate. Research supports that youth being engaged in programs is important. And so this is something that we wanted to do to make sure that the kids really were engaged in things that were going to promote them to make positive choices. And them making positive choices combats negative peer pressure. And giving those skills really makes a difference as young as possible. Next slide. So the messaging. So the consistent message to youth was developing a youth voice in Awning. We told them that this is going to be adult-led, but it's going to be the youth voice. It has to come from the youth. What do they want? What does it look like when events happen? What does it look like when programs are developed? That needs to come from them if they're going to be engaged in the community. So having similar knowledge, understanding, and skills is important for them to successfully negotiate youth advocacy in the Awning community. They all need to start from the same point, to have knowledge and skills. And certain kids had it, certain kids didn't, but in the end, I think everyone was basically at the same level. And they felt as though they had some confidence in being able to ask for what they wanted, which was great to see. So their participation and feedback makes them founding members, essentially, of the Awning Youth Bureau. They gave a lot of feedback as to what it should look like. So going forward with the development of the Awning Youth Bureau, we do have some data and some information and possible programs that can be utilized to start up the program. And we taught the kids that they're key attributes of leaders that are the same as attributes that they see in leaders that they look up to. And that was important. Them identifying who are the important people in your life, who are the important people in the community, who are the important people in the world that you feel show good leadership. And how do you connect that to your life? Next slide. So participants, we had 51 registered, 63% of those registered participated, and 81% of those that participated completed. And it was great to see. I mean, we had 26 kids, and my understanding is we were probably one of the only programs in Westchester County and Lower Westchester and parts of Manhattan that had an in-person program. And our numbers were above some of the online classes that were being offered from the people that I've spoken to. Next slide. So these are the topics and information that we covered. The red shows the weekly themes that we used. And you can see several of the definitions that we did, several of the areas that we covered under subtitles to these things. We did employment basics, cultural competence, active listening and communication, social institutions, and identifying leadership. And, you know, the kids gave us input as well as to what they wanted to hear. And so it was great to be able to incorporate their thoughts and ideas into the program as we went along. Next slide. So active listening. Bruce Lee said, a quick temper will make a fool of you soon enough. And basically that means that the angrier you get, the more anger and emotions that you have, as they increase, your rational and decision-making decreases. So I used to teach TCI, Therapeutic Crisis Intervention, through Cornell University. And the adage that they use in their training for staff, direct care staff, is the angrier you get, the stupider you get, and you don't make great decisions. And so in this time was one of the reasons why we incorporated this part into the workshops. Next slide. Oops. So if I listen to you, does it mean I agree with you? No, it doesn't. And that was something that we discussed with the kids, something that they got to talk about, because a lot of things were going on in the community, and this was around the time of the unrest. And so we came to terms with, it's okay to disagree, but you have to respect each other. And that was important for the kids in the group, that they did show each other a great deal of respect, and they showed us a great deal of respect. Next slide. And so in the process, this is another technique that we taught them, were these 4 questions. I don't know if you can get up a little further up, but the 4 questions. And so the recent unrest, we felt it important to give them some skills so that they had the ability to address situations as they encounter them. Think about these questions. What am I feeling now? What does this person need, feel, or want? And how are our surroundings affecting the situation, and how do I best respond? If they ask themselves these questions before they respond, before they react, before they speak, it changes the dynamic of how they communicate with someone. And communication was one of the areas that we were covering. So getting yourself set in your own head was important. And not having that high level of anger, high level of discord in your own head makes a difference in how you're going to respond to people. And I think anyone here can also relate to that. Next slide. So active listening is a technique used in counseling, training, and solving disputes or conflicts. It requires the listener to fully concentrate, understand, respond, and I can't really see what the other part of that is, but and to remember what is being said. We did an obstacle course with the kids where they had to practice the skills of communicating and listening. This was great for them because we had talked about active listening, and then we did the exercise, and then they recognized, oh, that's what you were talking about. I wasn't listening to what was being said because I was listening to myself and what I wanted to do and how I thought this should be done. And so kids did learn something from this, and it's something that resounded throughout the 6 weeks. Kids kept referring back to the active listening, which was great. Next slide. So in the end, the active listening reduces defensiveness, supports communication, and supports others' feelings. It also increases your opportunity to be heard. And as we're talking to the kids about being advocates, talking to the kids about going out in the community, how are they going to be received? If you have something important to say, you want to be heard. And how you communicate with people is important. It matters. Next slide. So communication matters. Next slide. And so this is some of the information that we shared with the kids. You know, speak up, be heard. If they can't hear you, they can't understand you. And in this time of COVID, we did the workshops fully masked. The participants were fully masked. The instructors were fully masked. And it was not easy sometimes. And so it was trying to get kids who are shy to speak up and to be heard. And we did some exercises to get them to do that. We did a power pose, trying to get them in the right body language to be able to speak, but also just telling them their tone, their voice, their pitch, the loudness. All of those things affect their communication and how they're received. And, you know, kids got it toward, you know, it took some kids longer than others to get it. And some kids were just shy and they weren't used to talking in front of a crowd. But, you know, going through the process and constantly reiterating the need to talk up and speak up and be heard, they got it over time. Next slide. So we talked about various communication, you know, feeling nervous, worried, unsure, how your body language communicates to people, how you stand, your posture, all of those things matter. And in the end, not being sure of who you are and what your values are can complicate the communication process. Kids are coming into their own, during middle school and high school. And that was one of the things we talked to them about. You're going through the process now. In the end, you'll have a better concept of who you are, in high school and college, but now's the time that some of the ideas are starting to be formed. So don't be afraid of them, challenge them, talk about them, and that it would help them in their communication process, help them in their esteem, help them in their ability to communicate with others. Next slide. So one of the areas we covered was cultural competence, and we use this as a basic definition. We used several other examples of what people had defined cultural competence as, and then we broke it apart to be able to have them define it for themselves as individuals and as the group. So to put it simply, cultural competence is a respect for each other's cultures, beliefs, and traditions, and learning about different cultures for understanding and acceptance without judgment. Next slide. So we did an exercise where the participants self-identified. We were asked to, and I spoke to Bill about this, we were asked to identify and observe the ethnic and cultural backgrounds of the participants. And through the program assistants and we came up with a list of who we thought they were, which we felt uncomfortable about, but it was required for one of the reports for funding, so we did it. But then we went back to the kids and we said, this is what we were asked to do, and this is a good time because the census is happening. And on the census, I think believes there's 28 categories of race and ethnicity that are included. And to give the kids a sense again of self-awareness and self-identity, we had them self-identify and talk about with each other. We didn't need to hear it. They need to talk with each other about where they came from culturally, food, traditions, things that they do in their house. And so it was a great exercise to get the kids talking about where they came from and talking about their experiences even here in Awning. Next slide. So this is just an example of one of the recaps that we did on cultural competence. And so I had mentioned that we defined several of the things that we covered, like prejudice and bias, implicit bias. We covered all those things, and we had the kids define, we had the kids look up those definitions as well, because we wanted them to have a better understanding of what cultural competence actually encompasses. Next slide. So again, one of the areas that we covered was employment basics, and we talked about their education and how they're preparing themselves going forward. And we kept COVID-19 in mind as we did all of this, and we talked about how in school they could promote themselves. We talked about working papers. How do you get your working papers? This is the time, at age 14 that you start working, and the process that you go through. Self-awareness was important. We talked about interest and expertise, because each kid has an interest. They have expertise, and in some cases, they don't even recognize it as that. So we did exercises around that for them to be able to identify it. And we included it in some of the slides coming up. Next slide. Another exercise we did was LinkedIn. So we explained what LinkedIn was. Amazingly, one kid had a LinkedIn page because I think he did an AP course, and I think that they told him that they wanted him to create one for something, and so he had one. But we use this as an example. Next slide. And so this is some of the examples and the presentations that the kids did of their LinkedIn. It was definitely an opportunity for them to consider their future selves and experiences they can plan for to get there. Some kids struggled with this exercise because they said, well, I don't know what college I'm going to go to. I'm only 15 years old. And we said, well, what college would you like to go to? It's not about what college you want to go to. Think about places you've been, places you've seen, colleges you've heard of. Is that something that you would like to experience? Don't think COVID, think the future without COVID and what the possibilities are. And what experiences might you like to have in order to get there? And so some kids came up with some very creative things. We had one who said, you know what? I've got like 2 or 3 things that I want to do, and I just cannot decide. So she decided that she was going to be a doctor on Grey's Anatomy, and that's what she did her LinkedIn page. But she actually utilized the format to think about and lay out what it would look like. If I was going to be a doctor, which medical field was one of her areas, if I was going to be a doctor, these are the things that I would want to accomplish. And, you know, she used Meredith Grey as an example. It was funny when she presented. It was great. Next slide. And so some of the careers and interests that they identified are here. And so the Community Academy, in a way, came out of this. And, you know, through conversation with Bill, Jamie actually helped us with identifying what it looks like, what it sounds like. So I thank her for that. I think her title was actually the one we went with. But these are the areas that we're looking for people to come in and speak about. And so the Community Academy, which is running this fall, is trying to get community members to make a connection with the kids and share their careers, share their passions with the kids. And so if anyone knows people in these areas, contact me, because we need to get speakers in. I've got a few. The mayor has actually reached out to me. We're going to set her date. I'm working on getting through to the superintendent of schools. We're back and forth trying to figure out a time to actually talk. Next slide. And so basically, you know, this is the ending of it. The upper left is the actual shirt that we created. That is a logo that one of the kids made. We had a logo contest, and we had long sleeve t-shirts made. Leadership component was throughout, and we called it Elite Summer Youth Leadership because leadership comes in all forms, and we had to have the kids recognize that and figure out where are they leaders, because some of them didn't feel as though they'd ever led anything, which isn't true. And so it was good to have the experience of kids coming to terms with they do have skills, they do have knowledge, they have been leaders, and they can continue to be leaders. We did an activity, My Town, and they actually they used the recreation center. I think we used religion and churches, we used the schools, and they decided on what that would look like for them. And it was a group project, and they each group had to come up with what they wanted it to look like and present it to the group and explain it and why. And so again, the kids got the opportunity to create their community how they want it to be. Upper right is the vision board exercise. The girl sitting there says hello because she was here waiting, but we ended at 8:30. They listened to the board meeting up until that point, and the kids were here, and so they said hello, but they had to go home. But that's pretty much it. Next slide. Oh, it might just go back. I think it was a loop.
That's it.
I think that's it, Mike.
I think it was a loop. It just goes back to the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what we did this summer. It was a good experience for me. I'm used to working with mildly to severely emotionally disturbed youth. And so for me, it was a different experience. And, you know, I thank Mr. Garrison. I thank Karen. I thank Alice, because I wouldn't be here without them.
Mike, that was so exciting. I'm really jealous of this experience that all these kids got to have. I've done a lot of these types of exercises, but I've done them as an adult. So I feel like these kids have you've really opened up so many opportunities for them, and you've given them really great training to ever run for office. And if we could bring you in to talk to our candidates before they run for office, I think Awning would be in much better shape. You've given them a lot of really great skills to learn about. And I was delighted to see Catherine Buzang-Hill was one of the folks you were working with this summer. She was one of our panelists very early in the summer when we talked about the youth leadership program. So that's terrific. She's you know, such a great voice of relatively young people in our community, just that next age up to be a good role model in this organization. And I loved calling the way that you identified them as founding members of the Awning Youth Bureau. That's just, I don't know if it meant as much to them as it does to me. I just think that's such a beautiful way to identify them and to really acknowledge the where we're going with this and the great role that they're playing with that. I guess I am looking forward to the Community Academy. I'll get back to you on the suggested date. I wanted to check on something. I'm very excited. I'm even more excited now to be part of it, now that I have a better understanding of what you're doing. And is it the same 26 kids, or you've got a whole new crop of kids now, right?
Some of the kids are repeats. There are a few new ones. But, you know, I didn't go into challenges that we encountered, especially more so for the fall. We got a good number for the summer, which most people were surprised about. But for the fall, at a certain point, the kids are zoomed out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're zoomed out, and then you want me to go to the rec center for an hour and a half on a Wednesday night. And so we offered Saturday mornings. And so we've got the core group that are doing both days, but you know, we told the kids, you don't need to come every week. We just want you to stay engaged, stay connected. I'm still in contact with several of the kids via email and or texting. So for them to be able to be invited to things, I felt it was important. If you're gonna keep this going, because I don't know what the Youth Bureau is going to look like in weeks or months, but to be able to move this forward and hand it off, however this happens, to have something and have a core group of kids that are interested in the future of Awning.
Terrific. My only regret is that we didn't invite you to go first, so that we could have had some of the kids. We could have actually heard from them.
Well,
we certainly could have flipped it. I just wasn't thinking it through. We could have flipped the items on the agenda. But thank you. So I know my colleagues have some questions and comments, and so I'll open it. Oh, I see Rika has her hand raised. Rika, why don't you go ahead?
Trying to be polite. Mike, thank you so much for fabulous presentation. I have 2 comments and 5 questions. I'm going to run through them because you may want to sort of cluster some of my questions into just one narrative, if that's okay. All right, number 1, just from next steps. I know you're laughing, but I'm trying to just put it into context. So I appreciate that. The career, the green chart with do we know people? I looked very briefly. Absolutely, I have. I'll raise my hand. I have some people, and I have some young people who are from the area who have already, recently become engineers, doctors, whatever, which is at least a closer age group, I think, which might be great. So definitely can help you out with that. So that was comment number 1. Comment number 2, when you open an adult bureau, please sign me up. I'd like to take all of this to become, frankly, a better person. I wanted to ask you 5 questions. Number 1, if you could please, for me, define from your point of view, and strictly your point of view, how you define a leader. Number 2, if you could do this again, what one thing would you do differently that would maybe move you to a higher plane? If you have thought about that, it could be something you wouldn't do again, or it could be something that you would do in a different way or something totally different.
Can we do one question at a time?
Please. I thought I'd make it easier for you by allowing you to cluster my questions. Go ahead.
No, that's not easy for me. I'm convinced that I have adult ADHD. So,
okay.
So, a leader for me is someone that I can trust and someone who is considering the full picture of what people need. I keep it very simple. I won't go into the politics of today.
You don't have to. It's a straightforward question. Okay.
And you said if I could change anything,
if you could do one thing different, eliminate totally that you didn't think of, but now you think of, what would that be?
I think the timing / recruitment. And I think that that's something that we struggled with because this was something that was pushed for. And it being in person was not helpful to some people who registered, because once they found out, they were not participating. But I think that the recruitment and the timing of it is important, and I think it's for any program. Because I think to include the parents in that recruitment process would be the thing that I would want to do differently. Because in some cases, kids their parents will tell them, this is where you're going to be, and this is where you better be. Because they want them there, because they want them to be safe, and they want them to have an experience. So I think that including parents and the kids in the process in the beginning, as part of recruitment, that's the one thing that I would definitely like to change.
Interesting, thank you. My next question was, if you surveyed the kids themselves, because it is a self-propelling, from what I understand, the kids actually designed some of the program as the time goes by, they have input. So if you did a survey at the end, towards the end, similar to what I just asked you, what is the one big idea that they had that they would like to see going forward? If you didn't do a survey, it's not database, fine. Maybe there was conversation that would answer that question as well.
Well, we collected information throughout. We didn't do, our plan was to do surveys, but then it became, trying to get the workshops to be relevant for the kids from the information that they gave us, and doing them like up until the time that the next workshop started, we were creating some of these and trying to incorporate some of the kids' ideas into it that we had heard from previous workshops. I think that one of the things that they mentioned that engaged them was them having the voice in deciding on the different topics. There's things that they're interested in. I think between that and the raffles, because we gave out gift cards and it became a thing, because who won more gift cards, who won gift cards in the same day, it was really an incentive. And I think that for kids that are interested in something and kids who are not interested in something, that was something that engaged them, because you had to be present in order to get into the raffle and then to get a gift card. So if you weren't here, you didn't get a gift card. And we did sometimes, one day we probably did 6 raffles, and gift cards were anywhere from $5 to $25, depending on the day, and I kind of mixed it up throughout the whole 6 weeks. But it's something that engaged the kids and kept them motivated.
Thank you. I wasn't kidding. I actually have this listed. I'm trying to be efficient. How can the board of trustees, the people sitting here, be of help going forward?
I think getting, once, and again, I'm not sure what the structure of the Youth Bureau is, but I think that a component that should be included in the Youth Bureau is definitely a council of some sort. And I think that the board participating with them, standing alongside them, listening to them, and helping to cultivate some of the kids within it would be helpful. Because I think that they need to see adults who actually are listening to them and hearing them. Because you can say you're listening, but do you really hear me is what the kids are more concerned about.
Great. Thank you. My last comment is, without showing my age, I will tell you that both in lower school and through college and graduate school, when asked from a leadership position what you want to be, there were a number of people that wanted to go into politics and to be the president. It is fascinating to me that didn't make any of your boxes. It's actually really disappointing for many people that I know. I had more than one friend who at some point in life said, I'd like to be the president, like for real, and actually made that. One of them got pretty close to going up. So that's upsetting to a person who is in politics. It's I think a message for the people on this call. It's something I'd like to actually fix. I'm sorry?
I will share something. The kids, I don't know how many of you have been here to the rec center, but for some reason, I don't even know if Bill knows this, but in the back behind me, there's a cabinet and it has a picture of Obama in a small frame. And a couple of the kids saw that and they were talking about it. And one day I came in and the picture was literally on their table. I was like, okay, why is this here? And they're like, because he's the man. And so it became a thing over the summer. And I happened to have an official invitation to the inauguration. And And so I brought it in for them to see, and then I made copies for them, because some of them actually included it on their vision boards. That was one of the exercises that we did at the end, was the vision board. And they actually included parts of the invitations on their vision boards. So there are kids interested in politics. They just
Oh, no. If
but
you
they
have to
want
put that in
to
quotes,
do it.
if you have to do air quotes.
Well, they said, like, it's one of the things of,
I got it.
I just don't know, what's going on today. I don't know that I want to be a part of that.
So I thank you for your time and for your terrific presentation and for answering all my questions. Thank you.
I'll go next. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Mike, for your work with all of this. I have personal experiences with the power of youth programming and the way that what can seem like elementary or really foundational or basic information can really help to lay a foundation upon which the rest of someone's life can go. And you just never know the way that an experience like this can influence a life. And so I really appreciate the work that you've done. My quick retort to my colleague, Deputy Mayor Levin, is I have actually philosophically a very different belief. I believe that no one should want to get into politics. Instead, I think that people should want to go and solve problems in many different ways. One of those ways should be to get into politics for a little bit and then get out. We should get like a rotation of people, or else we get like the same people. And unfortunately, we get like the same voices all the time. And I'd love to get some. You know that list that you had of all the different, I'd love to get some athletes in here and some doctors and lawyers, and I'd love to get different ways of seeing the world other than the usual way. Okay, off my soapbox, onto my gratitude box.
Connected to that is something that's what we talk to the kids about. You don't have to be the leader in front. There's many things that can be done behind the scenes that make you just as much of a leader and in support of that leader, and just as important.
That's right. No, that's absolutely right. Actually, I'll use an example to embarrass my colleague, Maddie Zachacz here. So Maddie is somebody who makes us look incredibly good as a board of trustees. She works super hard, and walking down the street, she would not be somebody that someone would immediately recognize because she's not an elected official. The benefit of that is that she doesn't get the blame. When things go wrong, we get the blame, but I just want to recognize that we also get undue credit with the amount of hard work that somebody like Maddie does. So any excuse to shout out Maddie. Thank you, Maddie. So I don't really have any questions. I just have a lot of gratitude, and I'm hoping that this is kind of the alpha stage of what the Youth Bureau can be, and just shows how much promise this has. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions and comments from the board?
Mike, I just want to say thank you very much for an exciting summer for some of the kids. With this whole craziness that we're going around, there's always something positive out of this, and just you're enthusiastic. The way you presented this whole thing, it was fascinating. I wish that there'd be more people that love the passion that you show for these kids. So I'm really grateful that you are actually were able to be part of us in our community and to change. Sometimes we change, people like you change kids' lives to a positive way. And one thing that struck me from what you said is some of the kids that are not involved on the full part, you're still in communication with them, you're still texting them, you still email, and that's something amazing. So thank you very much for doing that. And yes, I'm looking forward for the next steps and how the Youth Bureau will form a different face to our community and have more people like you helping our community and our kids to be a better persons for the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'll go. Oh, well, I guess I'm the only one left, except for the mayor. Yes, Mike, great presentation. It brings back, I coached for 20 years. So indirectly, it's working with the kids, teaching them life lessons. It kind of all meshes together. So brought back a lot of memories for me, how dealing with the kids and teaching them something and watching them apply it in a game. It was never a better feeling for the kid to come to the bench and go, Coach, that really worked, and they got it, and to this day, I have, from 20 years ago, I ran into a parent of one of my kids the other day. Hey, Coach, they don't forget you. They don't know my name. They know Coach. But I'm okay with that. I'm Coach. But really, great presentation, and looking forward to the Youth Bureau getting off the ground here, and hopefully in some way or means you could definitely stay in touch with it. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. I think I'll wrap it up here. I know we still have some things to go, and really all you're just getting is lots of kudos and admiration for this terrific program you've put together. I'm looking forward to your community academy, and something I learned a long time ago that just really resonated with me is people can only choose from the options that they know to be available to them. So I really appreciate you bringing in so many accomplished people in so many different fields in Awning to come and talk to these kids and just offer ourselves up as examples of what you can choose to accomplish. And because a couple of my colleagues brought it up, I will say term limits are not a good idea, and we can have that conversation all day long. We need Nancy Pelosi, we need Nita Lowey, as well as Ilhan Omar and AOC. There is a benefit to institutional knowledge and people understanding how government works. Okay. Had to say it. I know it's politics, but it's actually about our democracy. So since that was introduced, I couldn't leave it out there. Thank you very much, Mike. It was really, really a pleasure to have you here. And I'm delighted that there's a picture of our fantastic former president, President Obama, because he is certainly the ultimate role model and such an inspiration to so many people. So it was nice that the picture was just there and that the kids got to see it and have it be part of their conversation and thought process with what do they want to be when they grow up. That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all. It was a great opportunity for me, and it's something that I've done for many years. I've been working with kids, since I was in high school. And when I was in high school, we had a similar program to this. It was called, I don't know if people remember Bob Petrillo. He was a big guy in Westchester County years ago. But he had the summer leadership project that was run out of the town of Greenburgh. And so I participated in that. And that was basically a 4-week program, but the kids went for 4 hours a day. Like, it was intense. So programs do exist like that. It just takes, community support to make it happen.
And maybe you've already trained the future person who's going to be doing it in another community a couple of decades from now. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. I'm not going to stay for the rest of this.
All righty.
No
Thanks very much. Bill, is there anything else you wanted to say before Mike leaves?
No, Mike led a great team with Catherine and Clarissa and James. It was the workshops that I checked in on and oversaw. The kids were engaged, and the stuff they were doing, it was great. So we had a great team here this summer. So we're looking forward to the future as well.
Yeah, and they are very much involved in Awning things. And to be honest, I don't know what I would have done if I didn't have them. They got in, they went at it, they were great. So it was good to have them.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, and everyone have a good evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Bill, that's all for you too? All right, thanks.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you both.
Karen, what's up next?
What's up next? So that's going to be a tough one to beat. That was a very great and inspiring presentation. However, we do have a very interesting topic that we've been working on for quite some time now. As you may remember, a couple of weeks ago, Maddie Zachacz and I presented, and Andy Teese presented to the school board to talk about water taxation. And this is taxation of 8 water parcels, operation parcels that we have in the town of Awning that are owned by the village, that are assessed and that we pay taxes on. And we did an analysis of what that would look like if these properties were exempt, and how it would affect the taxing entities and the residents who pay into the water fund. Again, this is something that the board has been talking, the board in the town, the village in the town, the school district have been talking about for some time. We re-engaged these conversations last year, and we were making steady progress until March when the pandemic hit. So we re-engaged again these conversations. We had a very good presentation with the school board. They are the largest taxing entity, so their participation and agreement in the exemption is really key. So tonight we're going to show you a presentation. We're going to really do the same presentation. Illustratively, it will look at the, we're looking at the school district. We also have two other taxing entities, the town and the library, just to keep it clean and be consistent with what we present to the school board. We'll be essentially presenting the same presentation. However, we do want to recognize that there are two other taxing entities that are not going to be represented in the numbers that we're doing, but directionally, it makes a case. And the only thing that happens when you add the other two entities, which are much smaller, is that it just makes the case a little bit more impactful. So I do want to, before we get started, I do want to have Paul and Andy provide a little bit of background just for updating us. You know, again, the new water treatment plant is what's prompting this, because as that treatment plant begins to be constructed, the assessment is going to go up with the value of the new plant, and that is where we start to see real impact, and we can really explore what the plant looks like, what the impact is on water fund, and again, the residents that benefit from being provided water looks like with exemption versus having it continue to be assessed at market value. So with that, I do think it's important to go into a little bit of the history of the new plant, why we're doing the new plant, and even more recently, more and more reasons have been coming up of why a new plant is so important for our municipality and for people who use water in the town and village here. So I will turn it over to Andy and Paul for that background, and then we'll do the presentation.
I can start. So just to give a little history, hi board, a little history of where we are today and where we were. We started the design of the new water treatment plant back in 2016. The current plant is designed for 4 MGD, 4 million gallons a day, which was constructed back in 1986. The last upgrade was 1940 for that. We have really extended the life of the existing filter plant in the last 35 years. We accomplished this by building and rebuilding the following systems. So I just want to talk about some of the systems that were worked on a little before me and then during my whole tenure there. Installed all new chemical feed systems, and this is millions of dollars. This isn't small money. Rebuilt the sedimentation basins and the upflow clarifiers and chain drives. That was under Paul. We totally replaced the filters and under drain systems back in 2008. We replaced all the valves throughout the filtration plant. So that's kind of like what kept us in compliance in the last 35 years. And then in that, we did some things, and the mayor is the one who signed us on this. We signed on to the New York City Water Demand Management Plan back in 2016. What that did was we had to guarantee a certain percentage of unaccounted for water that we would find in the system leakage. And we did it well. We went from 30% down to 18% in lost revenue and lost water, which was really, really helpful. We were to a point at that time when we were going to sign on to other municipalities for interconnections because we were really concerned with our plant not making the numbers during the peak weeks in the summertime. And then to talk about the new plant and why we need the new plant, and I know the manager wanted me to speak about this, but the plant now does not meet 10 state standards, and that's really important. Basically, just this last summer, there was a 7-day period which we operated over 5 million gallons a day. We're allowed to operate 4 million gallons a day. However, you know, the water quality wasn't affected. We still put out perfect water, but we definitely have ramped up the flow because of usage in the summertime. So the state regulates the operating permit, and we clearly operate above the design loading rates for the existing filters and said basins. Currently, we're meeting all the EPA regulations. However, as the regulations get more stringent, we'll need to meet those standards in the existing facility. We will not meet these standards in the existing facility years down the road. So, you know, for example, right now, PFOAs, it's a big thing in Long Island. It's Teflon that's possibly in water. It's fire retardants. These EPA regulations are just coming into place this year, and we're starting to develop these baselines. Just like the MIB system that we never had in the past. We never had those situations on the raw water side of New York City. The silver lining was the plant took 4 years to design, and we're able to catch this in the final design before we build it with the UV and the peroxide system. And then the upgrade of the spillway and dam, which Paul could talk about. We've done a lot. So that's kind of where we're going. And that's why the assessment is going to change with the dam and with the new filtration plant. Go ahead, Paul.
Thanks, Andy. Sorry I got cut out from the beginning of the conversation. I lost connection. So I didn't hear the introduction, but I'm assuming we're talking about the derivative of the potential assessment on our improvements. As far as we can tell, the dam and the reservoir property and the structures associated with dam, like the spillway and the valve vault and all the other pertinences to that dam upgrade that we did, were never included in the assessment. I think that was something that they added on when they came and looked at the building itself, when the town solicited the state to come down and do a reevaluation of the entire facility. At that time, they picked up on the dam and gave us an estimated assessment. And if I'm mistaken, please correct me here. I don't think I am though. So that was new to us, and something that it furthers our reason for bringing this thing to some type of closure and ability to move forward as untaxed entity.
Thanks, Paul. Again, the purpose of this presentation for tonight, there really is no action for the board to take, but we do want to make sure that the board is aware of the presentations that we're giving to the school board. We've presented to the library board, and we'll be presenting to the town as well. And again, just another discussion for the public as well to understand why it's important that we go through with our updated water treatment plant, and why we believe that it's important that in doing so that we look at tax exemption for the water treatment plant and the associated parcels. And with that, why don't we start the presentation? So, Maddie, you can go to the first slide. So, as we discussed, so we're looking at the construction of a new water treatment plant for Awning that we know is going to cost a considerable amount. And we've been working over the past several months to really understand what a change in the taxable status of the treatment plant and the parcels associated with it owned by the village, but again located in town, would look like. And for each of the three taxing entities, the town, the school district, and the library, we've analyzed the impact of the exemption on the tax rate and really discovered that it would be relatively small. This is really important because as we're adding a new plant, there's costs associated with that will be bonded for, but also paid the debt service, and some of the debt will be paid out of the water fund, or the cost rather. So we want to make sure that as we're doing this, we still are able to maintain affordability with our water. Without the exemption, that just becomes more challenging. And that's more challenging for everyone in the water district, whether you're in the village or the town. You can go to the next slide. Again, we mentioned the taxing entities, and there's actually in the town, there's the town general, which is the entire town of Awning, but then there's also the town unincorporated, the school district, which is again the largest taxing entity, and the Awning Library. For purpose of this discussion, we are going to present information based on a home that costs $375,000, just to make it consistent and apples to apples. And we'll look at the implications of that home in the town and the village, and also in the entities that entities that are in the school district, the municipalities rather, they're in the school district in Newcastle and Briarcliff, but are not in the water district, to really look at everything. That was one of the big issues for the school district, is how does this affect municipalities who may see an increase in their taxes if we do the exemption, but won't necessarily benefit from water. So we go through all of those details. I do also want to mention that the town right now pays 50% more for their water than the village does. This is, again, that's a separate discussion. That's part of our intermunicipal agreement discussion. We are talking about that. That was established in 1968. So we are working with the town on the water IMA, and that is a separate discussion. However, we do, again, whether you're paying 50% more than the village, you'll still be paying less if the treatment plant is, and the properties are exempt. So with that, I think the next slide takes us into the details. So I'll turn this over to Maddie so that she can take you through the detail that she and Dale, and also we have Tom with us tonight too, our special guest. This is the brain trust behind an enormous analysis that we have distilled into a few slides here, but we're glad to have Tom with us as well, and he gets available to answer any questions because he is also very familiar with this. So, Maddie.
Okay. Thank you, Karen. Good evening, board. Can everyone hear me? Yes? Okay, great. As Manager Jatori mentioned, we actually did this analysis based on 2 school budgets ago. So when we initiated this analysis, it was in January or February of 2020, at which point the school was still using their 2019-2020 budget. So that's all the information that we used here. It is updated in a certain way, which I will explain, but just to keep it as clean and as possible, we use that same set of numbers, which is what was initially, shown to members of the school board before a public presentation 2 weeks ago. So when we look at the baseline, again, this is for the 2019-2020 school year, and I'm going to go through the lines one by one. I won't do it on every slide, I promise. So as Manager Jatori mentioned, we're looking at the same home as if it were in all 5 of these municipalities, all of which have properties which are covered by the Awning School District. So as you can see, in the village of Awning, in the unincorporated town, and in the village of Briarcliff, it shows up as $375,000. As Paul was alluding to a couple moments ago, back in 2015, 2016, the town of Awning underwent a revaluation, which means all of our properties are now 100% of value, which basically reflects exactly what you would be able to get for it on the market. However, we are unique. Many other municipalities have not done that in some time. And so they use what's called an equalization rate. An equalization rate is something that's assigned to municipalities in Westchester by the county Office of Taxation and Finance. And basically it's a multiplier. So a house that's valued in Ossining at $375,000, find out how much you, the base on which you would pay taxes in Newcastle, for example. You would take the multiplier, which I don't have right in front of me. I think it's 19.1, and you would multiply it by the 375, and that's how you get the base value. So similarly in Yorktown, they have a different equalization rate, so that's why these numbers look different. But rest assured, this is the same house, whether you're in Yorktown or in Ossining. We used the actual school warrant for the Ossining schools. And as you can see, it's a little bit lower in Newcastle, or significantly lower, and also in Yorktown. The school warrant is apportioned by municipality. So again, all of these are in the town of Ossining, which has, you know, the greatest amount of value, the greatest amount of properties, and smaller portions are in Newcastle and in Yorktown. The roll value, similarly, most of the value is in Ossining, and then smaller amounts of value because of the lower amount of parcels are in Newcastle and in Yorktown. And as you can see, again, the school tax rate, everybody's paying exactly the same amount of taxes on that $375,000 house. It's just adjusted for the equalization rate. So when we look at the quarterly water bill, again, this is just for Village of Ossining, an unincorporated town. As Manager DeTore mentioned, the unincorporated town pays 1.5 times, but if you multiply that by 4, you get what the average home at $375,000 is paying for their quarterly water bill. So as you can see in the town of Ossining, it's a little bit more, but keep your eyes on these numbers because we'll come back to those in a little bit. So now let's go to the current school year, which again, this is not based on the actual budget that was adopted by the school district in May of this year. This was our projection of what it would be in February of this year. So it's basically a rollover of the baseline condition. We applied a 2% multiplier to the warrant amount to coincide with the 2% tax cap. And again, you'll see the same thing, the same house value. The school warrant, like I said, has gone up by 2%. The roll value has stayed exactly the same, except for we know in Ossining we added some value, so that number is actually real. And then the school tax rate is adjusted a little bit. And again, everybody's paying the same school tax bill. So only because of the fact that they have equalization rates and they're not at 100% of value, in Newcastle and Yorktown, the only way that they have changes in the roll value is when something is built or when something is destroyed. Whereas in Ossining, the market sort of dictates how the assessment roll changes. So if values of property go up or go down, that's reflected in the roll. Whereas in other communities, because they're not at 100%, if there's a fire, that property will be decreased in value. If something new is built, it will be increased in value. But other than that, your property value doesn't change from year to year, which would explain why the share of the roll that Ossining takes changes a little bit throughout this analysis, and the other communities do not. So for going forward, all of the assessment numbers are frozen along these conditions, which again are reflective of what actually the roll was at the time when we did the analysis. So if back in February when we had been speaking to the school board, if they would have said, you know what, you guys are brilliant, you're right, we want to do exactly what it is that you're recommending and we want to exempt these properties, this is what it would have looked like. So again, everybody is paying the same tax bill no matter where they are, except everybody's paying $14 more in taxes than they otherwise would have without the exemption. So again, regardless of whether you're in the Village of Ossining, Town of Newcastle, Town of York, in schools, you now pay $14 more a year total than you otherwise would, but the water bills go down significantly for those folks in Ossining and in the unincorporated town of Ossining. So now we're fast forwarding. This used to be, well, can I stop here and ask if anybody has any questions? Because I know this is pretty dense and I'm going kind of quickly. No questions. Okay. So now we were fast forwarding 5 years, but now since almost a year has gone by since we've done this, let's just call it 4. So now we're in the 24-25 school year. And let's assume that we did not build a new water plant. So everything's exactly the same as it is today. We haven't taken on any new debt to build a water plant. Everything's just going along as normal. So we increased the warrant by 2% a year, like in accordance with the tax cap, 2% a year. We haven't updated any assessments for anything in the community. We just pretend that nothing has changed. We did not exempt the water properties. And like I said, no water treatment plant has been constructed. So this is basically just our control for the other 2 scenarios. So now we go to scenario B, which is is a new water plant have built, and it is taxed, which means none of the property is exempt. It was at $6 million, roughly the same as it is today, but now we've added $70 million worth of value. So that gets added onto Awnining's share of the roll. So just this section here, Newcastle and Yorktown don't get that section added. So technically their share of the roll value and the warrant, these are related, go down. So this is good news. $175 decrease per household. Everybody in the school district gets $175 lower tax bill from the schools than otherwise might. However, the water bill for the folks in Awning Village and unincorporated town will go up as much as $400 annually. So to save $175 for each house in the school district, the folks in Awning have a water bill that will go up by $400. I want to take a minute and also speak about when we were going through this analysis first, we looked at houses along not the entire spectrum, but a much wider spectrum of home costs. So I think we started around $250,000 all the way up to $750,000. And something that was very clear to us was that the increase to the water bill would be felt by those who can least afford it. Many of the lower value homes happen to have been in the village of Awning, and your water bill isn't based on your home value. It's based on how much water you use. And it doesn't matter how expensive your home is. Most people use the same amount of water regardless of what sort of home they live in. If there's 4 people living in a home, they're going to use the same amount of water in a $250,000 home that they would in a $600,000 home. So that's the equity argument here is also pretty strong because again, the $400 to those who can least afford it is significant as compared to the $175 decrease. Another point here is that the $70 million increase to the roll is short-lived. This is not like if a new company came to town and they built a small airport and $70 million worth of value is going to stay on the tax rolls for an extended period of time. Because of the nature of the installation of the plant, it will begin to depreciate, rather quickly, which means everybody will get used to a slightly lower tax rate, right? That $175 decrease per household, but that's going to shift rather quickly as the plant depreciates, and that share is going to be redistributed back to all those households in the districts in rather short order. And then finally, we get to the scenario that we would like to see as the ending here, which is a new water plant is built, but for the debt service, there's no additional cost because it would be tax exempt. So basically you can see we took off the $6 million at which the plant is currently valued, and there would be an increase. Every house in the district would see a $15 increase per year in their school taxes. However, the water bill for the homes in Awning will only go up about $32 on an annual basis, as opposed to $400, which is what we saw in the taxed version. So again, it is an increase for $15 per household for everyone in the district, including these folks in Newcastle, Yorktown, and Briarcliff who don't have the added benefit of the less expensive water. But the difference in the water bill is significant. $2,315 as opposed to $2,284 under the prior scenario. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you so much. I love talking about water, so I really enjoyed delving back into this. It had been a few traumatizing years ago that we really delved into this, and I got to learn about it initially. Can we go back to looking at each other? I realize we may need to come back here if people have specific questions, and they very likely will.
Yeah, sure thing. This is sort of just the summary.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Summary slide. Karen, I didn't know if you to go back over this or. Karen? Okay.
She's muted.
Okay, she's having some kind of issue. Okay, so I can go through this just very quickly. So in summary, and again, I know that this is rather dense and complex, and I went through it pretty quickly, but if the
Maddie,
water
excuse me, Karen's having a problem with her computer right now.
Okay, I gotcha.
Okay.
If the water properties are not exempt, it will cause the folks who pay into the water system to have a dramatically higher increase than they would if the properties were exempt. Even in the scenarios where there are folks who are outside of the water district who are going to be paying extra as a result, the extra is about $15 per household per year, which is not terribly significant. The other thing that we brought up with the school district, which is important to them and to a much smaller degree to the library, is that if the water bills continue to go up, those expenses are borne through the school and the library's operating budget. So in some ways, and again, to a smaller degree, the folks in Briarcliff, Newcastle, and Yorktown who attend the Awning schools are going to pay for that water one way or the other because the school has to pay for their water, right? So that's going to come out in the school tax rate. So basically, it's sort of there are no losers in the scenario, as the slide says. This, you know, the people who are impacted without any sort of positive result are impacted barely, and the folks who can least afford it are very much helped by not having the water plant taxed, and also something that we didn't talk about. This is a very unusual situation, just by virtue of the fact that the water properties are located outside of the municipality that owns them. That is very, very rare. And that is the only reason why they would have been subject to taxes in the first place. If they would have been within the village of Awnin's borders, this wouldn't be a conversation we would be having. So we were asked that question by the school board, how do other communities do it? And the answer was, well, they don't really have to because it's sort of a non-issue there. So we are hopeful that the school, the town, and the library are going to see the rationale behind that and how this would be helpful for everyone if these properties were to be exempted. Basically, the next step in this process would be for all three of those boards to pass a resolution and get it to the town assessor before May 1st, which is taxable status date. Certainly, we would hope that they would get it done much sooner than that because you never know what the next couple months could look like, as we've seen. But that is the next step. At this point, there is no action required of the village board. This is something that we've asked the library, the town, and the school to do, and we await their requests for more information or hopefully their resolutions.
Okay, I just want to thank you very much for that, Maddie. I want to just highlight a couple of other facts related to this I think you touched on, but I'm not sure that everybody really internalized. And that is, as Maddie was just going into, how unusual it is that the village has these publicly owned utility properties that are taxed. That's quite unusual. If you think about all of the other publicly owned properties, whether it's the schools, the towns, the villages, those are tax exempt, which is what we're asking for, to have tax exempt status. It's unusual, but water properties are permitted to be taxed if they're outside the municipal boundaries of the municipality that owns them. New York State allows for that, but certainly doesn't require it. And in fact, we're talking only about the 3 taxing entities that we need to go to. When we started this process 5 years ago, the county was on that list. And guess what? They responded right away and said, oh, wait, this is unusual, but we've seen something similar to this before. And of course, we will pass a resolution immediately to exempt the properties because that is consistent with our practices at the county government. So the county government had a little bit of a history to be able to put this into context and realized the appropriateness of exempting these properties. So that's why they're not on the list. Hopefully the schools, the town, and the library will recognize that and adopt that same approach. And then the other thing I wanted to point out to people, because any of us who own any kind of property are familiar with how our property is assessed, and you look at comparables and what other properties have been sold in the last year in your neighborhood that are somewhat like yours. And public utility properties are assessed very, very differently. There aren't comparables that they look at for what other water treatment facilities exist and how they're taxed, perhaps because that's an anomaly, but instead it's done based on the value of the property and the stuff in it, which is why that $70 million number is going to exist for a minute and then immediately start depreciating. It's just like you buy a brand new car, you drive it off the lot, next week it's worth a lot less. So that that peak at 70 million looks like a boom in the assessed value for the municipality, but it quickly depreciates, and that's something that I'm glad you were able to explain to the folks on the Board of Ed. And I did just want to complete the understanding of where we are. We are grieving our tax assessment, right, on some of our properties. So could somebody just explain what that is and how that fits into this larger discussion, if at all?
We are bringing a tax certiorari proceeding with regard to the 8 properties to argue that they are essentially overassessed and that there should be no assessed value. That the board recently gave authority to commence those that action, and that followed a determination by the town's Board of Assessment Review to deny the village's complaint with regard to those 8 properties to have the assessment at 0.
If I could just, Mayor, those 8 that he referred to are all of the water properties in the town, not just because you referenced it as some of the properties.
Well, I think
that's correct. They're all the 8.
Well, they're all the 8 that are in the unincorporated town that are because any in the village are already tax exempt, and I believe we actually have 1 property that's in one of the other municipalities that's irrelevant because it's not taxed by the Awning town tax assessor, right? So there are 9 properties that are actually taxed, but one of them is even outside of Awning, right? Is it Newcastle?
Yes.
Right, okay. And then any that are in the village, we obviously don't tax ourselves. If we did, we would exempt ourselves instantaneously. All right. Does anybody else have questions? Because there was a lot that we went into today, but this is not the first time that we've seen these numbers, but it is really helpful for us to know exactly what you shared with the school board. Does anybody else have any questions?
Thank you for this presentation. My question is, now that this is the, I don't know, 3rd, 4th plus time that you've done this presentation, you've shared it with people that are much more skilled at analyzing something like this. What is the smartest question you've gotten so far?
So
I don't know who you think they've been sharing it with.
I think part of the challenge, Trustee Lopez, is that this is extremely complicated. So it's a learning curve for pretty much everyone we've shown it to. I do think that when we were talking to the school board, some of the questions that they had that were particularly good questions in light of the decision we're asking them to make was, you know, what's the genesis of the new water treatment plant? You know, the way they bond for capital improvements is a little different than we do, and they wanted to ensure that that was a transparent process, and that's why we wanted to talk about our process and bring you guys up to speed again and refresh that. So because we have a different process, but also transparent, you know, that, so a lot of the questions were sort of understanding what the implications of the ask were. The other issue was that, you know, obviously there are some people in the school taxing district that will not benefit. So what would be the impact on them, and how do we evaluate that? So a lot of the questions really had to do with understanding better and understanding why at the end of the day the pros for this likely outweigh, you know, certainly in our estimation, but if you look across the board and the numbers bear that out, outweigh the cons, and that ultimately this is a smart way to make sure that we're preserving our ability to provide water to our community, which we know is essential, but that we're also doing it in a way that is looking at costs across the board and making sure that we're minimizing the impact of either taxes or the actual water rate. In this case, because the implications for the water rate are so significant, when I think initially people weren't looking at it that way. So to really do that comparison was able to eliminate some of the issues that people had initially when talking about this, and demonstrate what the real impact would be. So I don't know if that, we had a lot of very good questions, but I don't know that we've presented to very few people who, and including, you know, all of us, we really spend a lot of time and effort putting this all together so we can do that analysis.
Thank you.
Anybody else with questions or comments? Rika says no. Bob says no. Manny.
Well, I'm gonna.
I was gonna say, I was that thorough. Awesome.
No. You actually were. You know, and I'm gonna.
Manny's seen it twice though. So.
I'm hoping I'm gonna be brief on this one. You know, it is almost 10:30, and we still have a couple more items on the agenda. I do want to say thank you, Maddie. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Dale, Tom, Andy, Paul. Everyone that worked on this presentation is you know, it was amazing. Like I told you guys last time, I watched this presentation while I was going on on the board level, school board level, and it was pretty detailed. Obviously, I'm disappointed that 5 years later we're still talking about this issue. You know, that has nothing to do with our staff. I think you know, between Tom, Paul, Andy, and previous staff had done an amazing job going through all these all the different entities to go forward or try to move forward with this process. So, you know, one of the things that you know, sometimes we complain about our government and kind of how slow things work. This is one of them. This is one of the things that, you know, I can honestly say this is taking way too long. And Karen, I'm kind of going to disagree with you. This is very simple. To me, we have a lot of other municipalities and how, you know, how does that work? Maybe, yes, we are unique in different levels, but it's very simple. The town of Awning can always say, guys, you don't need to pay taxes on these properties. They can do that. They have chose not to. And now we are where we are. I hope we can move forward with this. I hope we can get the exemption that we're asking for 5 years. And hopefully, you know, we don't have to, you know, we don't have to go through these discussions, hopefully from, you know, maybe less than a year from now. But, you know, just keep something in mind that we do have to think about this when we go to our budget part, is that we do have to go through this process because we do have to allocate money because we are responsible to pay the taxes for these properties. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to make sure that we have enough funds to do that. And I'm going to defer those conversations to Dale when it gets time for us to discuss this the water properties, and we can discuss that then. But thank you, Maddie, for all that, you know, great work that you guys did, and Karen for all that. The presentation, that was amazing. So I'm just waiting for, you know, I'm waiting to see what the presentation of the town is going to look like when that comes about. I'll be watching as well, and hopefully I'll have the same reaction that the school board did, because it was, I believe it was positive, a very positive reaction on there. I mean, there was some
Very much so,
but it was, you know, very positive. And so I'm going to keep my fingers crossed, and then we can move on to the next level and actually start working towards other goals. So thank you.
So I want to go back to something that Manny just said and get some clarification. Is it true that the town, as the taxing authority, could just unilaterally say, these properties are no longer assessed at, these properties are now exempt? Do they have that power as the assessing authority? That was what I think you were saying, right, Manny? And I know we've asked this question, and if they have that power, then let's just go up to the third floor and beg, plead, demand, whatever.
That is not my understanding, but I would certainly defer to Stuart on that. In the same way that, all taxing entities theoretically are to either oppose or support a pilot agreement, I think the same principle is guiding this.
That's not
Yeah,
true.
the county IDA actually said that we get to make.
Yeah, we get to decide that.
We could explore a pilot with the town. I believe that was
No, that's
at
not
one
what
point.
that's not what we're suggesting.
Yes, but that would be a different conversation.
Yeah, we looked into that. That's kind of messy and doesn't achieve the goal.
Yes.
All right, then the one thing I want to point out to people, because I've spent way too much of my life thinking about this and didn't come up today, but if you have an opportunity to talk with you about it, something to understand. The flip side of what about the people who aren't in the water district, who don't have the benefit of this fantastic Awning water system? What about them? Well, I'd like to talk about what about those of us who are in the Awning water system. We are the vast majority of the taxpayers to the school district. We are right now contributing twice to the school district. We pay property taxes to the school, a lot of them. We have the highest effective tax rate in Westchester County, and 2/3 of that goes to the school. Guess who else pays property taxes to the school district? The water department. The water fund also pays school taxes. Where does the water fund get its money? From us, the water users, when we pay our water bill. The schools are double dipping on every single resident who pays taxes and pays a water bill in the village and unincorporated town of Awning. And that's how it's always been, but that doesn't mean that's how it should always be. All right, what's next?
Okay, up next, and I just want to apologize. While Maddie was doing her fabulous presentation, my screen started to break up and then completely went blank, and I had no way to unmute myself, and I really apologize. But I could hear you guys. But Craig is working with me to find out why demons are possessing my machine tonight, so I apologize for that. Next up, the village is required to have a breach notification policy, and this would be to protect us in the event of a cyber attack. So Stuart is working on something that we can adopt, and the ask will be for the BOT to adopt this policy at some time in the future. Craig is here tonight to join this conversation. And also, we have applied to the Department of Homeland Security for a free cyber audit. So we are working on this, but again, to answer any questions, to explain what we're doing, why we're doing it, and I turn it over now to Craig and Stuart.
Thank you, Karen. Good evening, Mayor, members of the board. The state technology law requires that every municipality and public authority, et cetera, have a breach notification policy. I'm somewhat abashed to acknowledge that that law was passed in 2006. And if you look at most breach notification policies, they actually went into effect in March or April of 2006. It can be done either by local law or by resolution, by local law or by policy. The state technology law was amended back in 2019 to add a couple of additional definitions to the term private information, and also to include not only the acquisition, but the ability to access certain property could be considered a breach. And what the policy does, and I've sent you all a copy of the proposed policy, is it effectively provides individuals with notice or how they would be notified in the event that there is a breach. And there is a specific definition of breach of security of the system, and what that would involve if there is a breach, there are notification requirements, not only to the individual who is the subject of the breach, but also we would have to notify the Department of State in some circumstances, the Attorney General's office, the State Office of Information and Technology Services, and in some circumstances, credit reporting agencies would have to be notified. Depending upon the size of the breach, we may have to change our notification. If it's a breach that would involve potentially more than 500,000 people or cost more than $250,000 to undertake the notification, there are other notification methods that have to be done. A few things that are of interest. If there is a breach, you can notify the individual by email. However, the person has to tell you that they will accept such email notification. If they do not, you have to essentially just do it the old-fashioned way and let them know that there has potentially, been a breach. Private information is, well, public information, let's start with that, is basically any name, number, personal mark, or other identifier that would identify a person. Private information would be personal information plus what's considered data sets, things such as social security numbers, driver license numbers, account numbers or credit card numbers, biometric information, or alternatively, a username or email address, which in combination with a password would allow access. If it is information that is publicly available or lawfully made available, it's not considered private information. Although the breach is supposed to be remedied quickly, if it is for a law enforcement purpose that the information has been disclosed, then there are some other factors that have to come into play with regard to that. But the important thing is that the village needs to have a policy in place. Again, it can be policy, it can be local law. Municipalities tend to vary with that, but I think the policy is easier because if we go by local law, we then have to do public hearing, we have to notice it. I'm not saying you wouldn't do that, but you don't have to go through all the steps that you need for a local law. The policy that I have supplied you folks with is based in large part upon the policy of the town of Pittsford up in Monroe County. I use that one because that is one of the few I found that actually adopts, that includes the most recent amendments to the state technology law. Our neighbor just to the north, Croton, adopted a policy in 2019, which was adopted a few months before the amendments to the state technology law were put into place. Again, we are required by law to have such a policy, and my thanks to Maddie for reminding me that that's one of the things that Wade Beltramo was putting out there from NICOM. It's just something that, we effectively need to have and have as one of our many policies. I just, want to get this before the board. Is it something that you have to vote on at the next meeting? No, but I think it's better to vote on it as soon as you can, so we can have that report, that policy in place, so that we're not, outside of what is otherwise required by the state technology law. Thanks. And by the way, Craig is advised, and I should just let you know, we've never had a breach. Which is important, but that doesn't mean we're not supposed to have the policy. So that's why I do it.
Absolutely. It's much better to have the policy in place in advance of having a breach so that we know how to handle it. And I support your suggestion of it being a policy, largely because you're going to want to update it somewhat, particularly because this involves technology. And as we know, our laws get outdated pretty quickly when they get that specific. So I like the idea also of it being a policy voted on just by resolution rather than code. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And if you feel like it's ready to go, to my colleagues, if you had a chance to read it, did you have any questions about how things are being presented and want to suggest anything different? Manny says no, nothing different, looks good. Rika says no. Bob says okay. So if you want to put this on next week, everybody's good with it. We think you did a great job, and we want to get it in place as soon as possible.
Yeah, and Mayor, just one thing in response to what you just said. There is, and I this is actually came from the, the village of Westbury out on Long Island. The last paragraph of the policy is an evergreen provision. So if the state should modify or change or amend Section 208 of the state technology law, the policy will automatically be amended. So if they decide to make something else private information, they can do that. So we're okay with that. But I can certainly put this before the board as a resolution next week to just adopt the computer system security breach notification policy. So thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you. Look at that. It's so efficient. Thank you. Madam Manager.
Thank you. So next we will be looking at a proposed license agreement for 26 Campwoods LLC, which was formerly Miller's Mobile, the gas station on the corner of Campwoods and Bell Avenue. So I'm going to turn that over to Corporation Counsel.
Thank you, Karen, and I thank Paul and Jaime for being on this tonight. Basically, what this is an application to enter into an agreement with the owner of 26 Campwoods, whereby they are proposing to do certain right-of-way improvements. And in addition, part of what they're doing does encroach upon portions of village property. Some of those encroachments have actually gone on for many, many, many years, so that people know that. Maddie, I had sent over the most recent plans, which sort of have stuff in red, and maybe if you could put that up, I think that could help.
Yep, you got it.
Paul and Jaime to just sort of give a description of what's planned here, particularly with regard to the new crosswalks that are planned to be put in.
How's it going, everybody?
You don't even get to start till after 10:30 tonight, huh, Jaime? But we didn't want to miss one. We didn't want to miss a whole week without you.
I was having fun listening to a lot of really lively discussions. So, all right. So everybody knows the gas station. It's got probably some of the cheapest gas in town. I go get my tank filled up there from time to time, and they're proposing to basically make a massive improvement to the property, whereby they're going to take out the 2 bays of where they're mechanic shops essentially, and their reasoning behind that was that essentially people just don't want to do it anymore, right? So they one family member sort of passes the business off to the next generation, but they sort of run out of generations that are interested in doing this kind of work anymore. So they're moving into a retail use, which is an expansion of the existing use. And as part of that, they're going to make some big changes to the facade of the building. They're going to convert those bays, and then they're going to sort of reopen up the space. But part of those improvements, because it is a new retail use, upon review by Paul, the village engineer, and the consulting engineer's questions, there's a feeling that there should be some improvements to the crosswalk because of the potential for increased pedestrian traffic, and there not being a real clear way to get over there without crossing the street without a crosswalk at this point. So they examined looking at bringing it closer to the corner down the street, but there is a big wall. So if you look here in the lower right hand red corner, they had said, well, could you potentially extend the sidewalk up? And that was deemed to be a little bit too difficult. There would have to be probably some work on the adjacent property owner's property, as well as the fact that the long sort of steep decline there made it a little difficult to put something like that in. So instead they looked at taking a crosswalk and putting it across Bell Avenue and then bringing it across Campwoods, which was determined to be the safest spot and also would not require the movement of any existing infrastructure like the fire hydrant, which is over there on Campwoods. They're also going to do some improvements to the plantings at where the current island already exists with plantings, but they're going to increase those. And over at the lower right-hand section, that is actually all paved asphalt right now. And so they're going to sort of return some of that asphalt to the dirt. They're going to spruce up the landscaping over there and just make it a nicer intersection. So they had to get approval by the planning board for site plan. They also needed to get approval by the zoning board for their parking variance. And I want to say that they had a conditional use. So there were some conditions put onto that use that they put in so that they can't stay open past certain hours, because there were concerns by the planning board that they might, you know, be running their business a little too late in the night and sort of the disruption that might have to the residents on Bell Ave. So they are not going to be open too late. And of course, the lighting on the site was organized in such a way to make it much nicer. They also had to, you know, make several other improvements, like the retaining wall next to the neighbor is going to be fixed all the way. It's just going to be a more cohesive site. But essentially, what they're coming to you today for is to get a license agreement for the improvements that they want to do to the right-of-way, including the crosswalks, the plantings, and things of that nature. And there is something that is not highlighted on here, but is a part of the discussion. If you could zoom into that canopy, you actually can see it here. There's a little bubble next to the number 4 there, right in the center, and it says existing encroachment of 0.3 feet over the property line of the canopy. So they're not proposing to make any significant changes to the canopy, but they are going to change the company that they purchased their gas from. So I think that they may be like going from Citgo to BP or vice versa or something like that. And so in order to make that change to the sign, they would need to obviously go to the building department, and they have an encroachment of, again, 0.3 feet. So a very, very slight encroachment of that canopy onto the village right of way. So they would need, you know, the license agreement to reflect the ability to make that change there as well. That's it.
Thanks. This
Hi, May.
is. Oh, go ahead.
May I add a couple of things first?
Oh yeah. I'm sorry, Paul.
Hello?
Of course.
Well,
Go right
thank
ahead,
you. Just building on what Jaime had mentioned earlier about the things we're putting in there for pedestrians. Obviously, if you know that area, it's primarily service and gas, and they're changing it into a convenience store. There is heavy foot traffic in that area already, and there is a little strip store right across the street from there that's highly accessed by pedestrians. So we wanted to facilitate the ADA accessibility and pedestrian foot traffic, but at the same time, we wanted to keep it away from the already very congested intersection with Stone and Campwoods, right outside Austin Lawnmower and the Lipton's area up there. So we pulled it down, having it set down here on the bottom left corner of your screen. It also has limited impact on parking. People do park all along that road there, but it kind of fades away the further you get away from the intersection with Stone. And the existing sidewalks work best to this situation here. So that's why we located it here versus trying to force it into that lower right-hand corner of their existing lot. But it is surely a pedestrian laden area, and with the creation of a convenience store there, we know we're going to have to give people a safe place to cross to get to, and now do it when it is during their construction and on their dime.
Well, I'm always supportive of having more safe pedestrian pathways, so I think that's great having that incorporated into the corner there. The owners of Lipton's, I'm glad you mentioned them, Paul. They're probably not going to be very happy about this convenience store going across the street. It is a tiny little business district that is, as you mentioned, very well utilized by the neighborhood. Even my kids, and we live not even in the neighborhood, but they meet up with friends and buy stuff at Lipton's. And now there's going to be some serious competition in that neighborhood. Not that I'm against competition. That's interesting that you mentioned, Jaime, that there's going to be the, what is it? It's, 3/10 of a foot. So we're talking about like about 4 inches of encroachment over the village right away that the sign's going to be, which would be far above us. And much less significant than if it were an awning or something of that nature, which comes out over a sidewalk. So I assume that the building department will just, they've probably allowed those things as a matter of course, right?
Well, no. And so it's about 4 inches. It is existing, the canopy, so they're not proposing to change or move the canopy. And so when they did the survey, that's when they realized that the canopy encroached. And so I would say that to the idea of the building department sort of allowing that, they're not technically allowed to. So certainly the answer would be no. The building department unfortunately cannot allow that because it's not within their purview.
So then I'm not clear. Who do we have to allow for that? Is that why it's coming to us? That's
Yes.
part of everything we're
Yes.
being asked for? Okay. All right. So everything in these little red squiggles is what we're being asked to be supportive of. The canopy.
That would go into the license agreement, I believe. Stuart, maybe you can clarify that a little bit, but yes, I believe all that would go into the license.
Right. Anything, Mayor, that encroaches upon the village's right of way would be something that would be subject to the license agreement. So it would be the area that they're in the right-hand corner, the right-hand red square where they want to turn the area, the paved area, into more green area. But as you can see, it goes over the property line. It would include the 3/10 of a foot encroachment of the canopy, and the portion of the crosswalk across Bell where you have the curb cut that is proposed for that particular crosswalk. So that's all within the right of way. So that would all be subject to the license agreement.
All right, thanks for that. Does anybody else have any questions for the staff on this? Other than what's the next step?
We're only approving the things, our sort of purview is only those things within those red squiggly lines. That's what is in front of us. I'm really shocked that if they're keeping the gas and going from an 8,000, they're removing the tank, putting a bigger tank in. That corner, when you pull in to get gas, this is my neighborhood. You can't park your car there right now. They're parking everything on the streets that they're working on. So there's only 2 parking spots. I guess the third one is on this side where I can't believe this is approved.
Yeah, so let me try to explain it. If you could scroll this, I guess down a little bit so I can see the top end of it. So currently they're using it as a place to fix cars, right? And so if you pass by there today, you'll probably see there are a couple of cars for sale. There's several cars that are more or less being stored there, waiting to be worked on, or at some level of disrepair. And so the site has very little parking at all. So when they eliminate the use of that, they won't be allowed to store cars there for selling them. Certainly they won't be storing cars of any kind there anymore. All the cars will essentially be there serving the purposes of the space. So the required number of spaces that you need to operate this normally would be 8 spaces under the code. And so they only provide 4 spaces on here, but they went to the ZBA to request a variance for the 4 additional spaces, basically making the case that the spaces in front of the gas pumps are functionally spaces, right? You go, you park, you get your gas, then you run inside, you grab a couple items, then you come back to your car, then you leave. And they were able to receive that variance. So the tanks that you see that they're taking out are just kind of old tanks that need to be replaced, and they're being replaced with standard size tanks. So that review, and maybe Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Westchester County is the one who deals with the licensing over the removal and the replacement of those tanks. And so we really don't get into it as long as they're not, encroaching on any sort of land there. And part of the concern was when they moved those tanks was, well, if you're going to try to bring gas in, how's the gas truck going to get in? So we did, the planning board did request that sort of traffic patterns would be shown of precisely how the trucks would be able to get in, how they would be able to get out, the impact that would have if people were trying to drive around. So there was, all that analysis was done and reviewed by Keller Sessions. So we did kind of go through it through a normal process. The increase of the area for the retail, obviously it is bigger, but it's a permitted use in that zone. It's a conditional use, but it is permitted as a conditional use. So if that helps explain it.
Well, what it explains is that it's not within our purview. We are looking only for the things in the red. I mean, when they have the oil trucks pulling in now to dump the gas, they basically stop traffic because they're halfway out on the road. So I'm sort of surprised. I don't need Keller Session. I live there and I go there all the time. So it's just shocking because there's barely enough that you can turn around there now. And they end up using, I mean, it's like, I don't need to look at maps because I actually live here. It's surprising, frankly. But anyway, so we're only dealing with the things in this square red squiggly lines, right?
Yes, that is correct.
In front of us tonight. That's all we're looking at because the rest is not really ours to decide upon. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Thank you, Jaime, Paul, and Stuart. So this was already in front of the zoning board and planning board, correct?
Yes,
correct.
They got the variance for the parking. So I watched that meeting, and the site plan, was that approved as well?
Yes,
it was conditionally upon the this board, the decision of this board.
Thank you. So just keep in mind, a property around, I don't want to say around the corner, yeah, sort of around the corner in Cronin Avenue, a couple of years back, we did allow them to put their sign on village property as well. There was an agreement that we have with them currently, my recollection is. So I see this as an improvement of their site. Obviously I share the same concerns as Rika has because I do drive that neighborhood myself. But overall picture of what a lot of the stuff is existing, and we are improving the crosswalks in there. So pretty much the cloud area in red, those are the ones that we have in the additional improvements that I believe that was a positive request. So overall, I'm okay with that. I'm comfortable with saying I'm approving this, and at least myself, I'm okay with this concept. Yes.
Looks like the mayor stepped away. I have nothing to add.
Did she? I'm sorry. Usually she checks.
I'm back. I didn't think it would be that long. Sorry. Is there anybody else with questions for our staff on this process? Okay. Stuart, we're all good?
we're good. We'll have a resolution for next week.
Thanks very much. All right. Thanks everybody who was here for this. I don't know if anybody gets to go home now. We have another item or two. Thanks, Paul. Good night. Thanks, Jaime. Good night.
Thank you, folks.
Karen, Stuart? I think it's probably still Stuart, right?
Folks, yeah, this is fairly simple. It is an awning application for Melitas at 127 Main Street.
Right.
It is also on the HPC agenda for their November meeting. But since this is an awning that goes over village property, it does require the approval of the board. It measures 7 feet by 12 feet. It will be a roll-up awning, which will effectively cover where the chairs are right in the front. The only issue that unfortunately, what I have been advised is that the awning is being purchased through Wayfair. So there's been an issue about actually getting a fabric swatch, which, while not as significant for you folks, is a big issue for the HPC. So we're gonna try to work that out to see what we can do. But again, the reason this board approvals is needed is because it is going to be over village property, and that's the code. Mandates that it be the Board of Trustees that gives that approval. So again, this would just be to approve the awning permit.
Did you say it's over Melita's or over Doka's?
I believe it's 127 Main, whichever. The business here is listed as Melita's Home Furnishing.
It's over Melita's.
Yeah.
It's not over Doka's. It's over Melita's.
Yeah.
Strange that there's tables and chairs in front of Melita's. I think that's what's confusing.
Yeah, and also the construction that's already going on is actually at Doka's, not at Melita's. All the plywood that's up there when I drove by the other day.
All Melita wants to do is put an awning up, because when she moved back up to this front store, she can't put things that fade in the windows. So she's got a lot of clothing and stuff.
Yeah,
so the sun's just too bright.
Yeah, the sun comes in for a number of hours. I was in there. It's like amazing, actually. Yeah. Okay. It just isn't where the construction is. There's plywood actually at Doka's, not Melita's. That's why I'm sort of confused.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it's
It's
two
a different
separate
project.
things, though.
Okay.
Why is there a table and chairs in front of Melita's though?
I don't know why. I don't think that that whole building is I don't know. I have to go down and see, because I don't remember them being there the last time I was there. I don't know when this picture was taken.
Okay. All righty.
I'm fine with the awning.
Yeah, I mean, she can't really use the window without it.
It's lovely.
Stuart, quick question on regards to the awning. Usually they go in front of the HPC first and they come in front of us afterwards.
It goes actually either way. It can come before you, and then your granting is conditional upon the HPC, or if it goes before HPC, it can be HPC granting conditional upon you. Since their meeting is not till November, I believe, 2nd, this way we just come before you.
Okay.
I'm okay with that.
Looks good.
Obviously, the HPC, will have the final design or mountain or whatever else they will have to require for that one. So, but I'll leave that up to the HPC. But I'm okay with the concept of that.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Right? We just have exec session.
Yes, we do.
All right. Can we have a motion for? Yes, Karen.
Exec session. Okay.
Karen, I didn't notify you because it was not something that involved you or.
Okay, just wanted to make sure.
So Karen's saying she wants to leave and she wants to make sure she's not being.
Oh, no, I think Karen is saying she wants to go to the exec session.
Whatever you want me to do, I just wanted to make sure now that I'm back online. So.
Thanks everybody for another great meeting. A lot of interesting things that we're moving forward after tonight. Can we get a motion to go into executive session for matters of personnel related to specific persons?
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thanks very much. We will see everyone in a week in our hybrid meeting. This meeting is adjourned to exec.
Bye-bye.
Night.